Good evening. I understand that we have a quorum, and it's 7:02 by my watch. I know there are people still coming in, but we have a lot of business to do tonight, so let's get going. Please take your seats as soon as possible. I hereby call to order the continuation of the Town of Carlisle Annual Town Meeting for 2019. Good evening. I am Wayne Davis, your town moderator. Thank you for coming and being here promptly and supplying a quorum. Welcome to those of you who may be watching live on cable channel 9 or watching it on the web streaming at the Minuteman Media Network website. As this is a continuation of last night's proceedings, I will skip most, though not all, of the usual preliminaries. Fire exits are to your left. That's at the front and rear of the building. And if we need to evacuate the room, then I will adjourn the meeting until tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. in the same location. In the cafeteria, the fire exits are also in the right and left corners. Please take out your cell phones or any other devices you may have and turn off the ringers now. Anyone who fails to do so and interrupts the proceeding will ask you to stand up and tell us a joke. Okay, at this moment, I'd like to recognize Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So there is one good thing about going into a second night. Oftentimes when you're doing recognitions, you always worry about those people that you're going to miss. And I did miss some people last night, and I would like to recognize them tonight. I may have some of the number of years of service wrong because our records didn't quite go back far enough for some of these people. I'd like to recognize Steve Perlman for 2 years on the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust and 18 years on the Housing Authority. Alan Lahotsky for 11 years on the Housing Authority. Mark Leventan, I don't think this number is right, but 4 years on the Housing Authority. Carolyn Ng was 7 years on the Housing Authority and 3 years on the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust. Barbara Bajorzen was 3 years on the Housing Authority, and Morgan Burse was 1 year on the Housing Authority. Also, the town clerk's office, Eileen Blanchette, was with us for 2 years. Thank you to all of them.
Okay. In terms of procedures, I'd just like to remind everyone that there is a summary of the town meeting procedures available at page 40 of the green warrant book, and more details available at the town meeting page of the town website. And if you ever have any questions, you may rise to a point of order and ask. Let me also remind you to please correct me when I make a mistake, as you kindly did on several occasions last night. We tried out a new procedure last night to save a bit of time. I think it did. And that was that I just read the list of town board and committee votes on the articles rather than the prior practice that we had here in Carlisle of asking each committee to come to a microphone, stand up and give an 8-word report. Saved a little bit of time. And I've heard some feedback that people appreciated that, but I do want to make clear that my reporting of an official position does not preclude representatives from any board or committee from making a statement from the floor that elaborates on that vote. These bodies often devote considerable time and thought in taking their positions. They're making recommendations to you, their fellow citizens. So if there's relevant information from your consideration of these issues that you wish to share with the meeting, please do so. I didn't mean for this change of procedure to discourage anyone from providing such comments. In that regard, about the important work that committees do to get us to town meeting. We do have several zoning articles before us this evening, specifically Articles 18, 19, 20, 23, and 24. Now, the Planning Board is required by statute to issue a report and recommendation to the meeting. Your Planning Board has done so. They've informed me that however, that they will not be reading those reports to the meeting tonight, but instead have made copies available to everyone both last night and tonight. So if you didn't pick one up from the table outside, you should please do so. With the consent of the meeting, we'll have the Planning Board reports on Articles 18, 19, 20, 23, and 24 entered into the record. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, I'll assume the consent of the meeting. Also, last night there was a little bit of miscommunication on my part around Article 12 and my report from the Energy Task Force on their vote on Article 12 was not fully accurate. What I should have reported was, quote, the Energy Task Force did not take a position on Article 12, but did recommend that the town of Carlisle develop a master plan, close quote. So since I slightly misstated that yesterday, I'd like to ask the consent of the meeting to correct the record accordingly. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, the record will be so corrected. On to the cafeteria. As usual, we've set up the cafeteria to accommodate parents with small children. To help with procedures in that room, I've appointed Sharmali Das of 542 Cross Street to serve as assistant moderator and have sworn her to that position. Sharmali, could you just test the link, and are you there?
Hello, I'm here.
Very good. And how many people do you have there now?
2.
2, okay. Well, we will continue to check in with you, and if those 2 folks decide to leave at some point, just let us know, and we can close up and move back in here. So I would ask those who are in the cafeteria, if you can, please come to the auditorium to speak. If for some reason you can't, just please let our assistant moderator know, and she'll message me, and we'll give you the opportunity to speak. As a reminder to everyone in the hall, if anything interferes with your ability to hear, see, or otherwise participate in the proceedings, you may interrupt the meeting with a point of privilege to request that we rectify it. Also, please do know that we, again, have the special headsets available. They're at the right front of the auditorium, over in the other corner there, if anyone needs a little extra amplification of sound. So now on to the question that has been asked of me more than any other question in the last 48 hours. About ending the meeting. We do have a lot of ground to cover. Last night I noted that there is a Carlisle tradition that we do not take up any new articles after 10 p.m. But it's been a long time, if ever, that we had to go 3 nights for a meeting, and I asked some of the longest living in Carlisle people that I could find whether they recalled a 3-night meeting, and nobody could. So I don't think I'm taking too much liberty to say, at least in terms of recent history, it is a Carlisle tradition that we finish in 2 nights. So given that clash of traditions, when we get to around 9:30, 9:45, I will check in with you, and we'll see what we want to do. It's either, if we're not moving along quickly enough, we'll have to decide at that point that we'll either press on through as long as it takes, or that we'll go to a certain time, and then after that adjourn and reconvene tomorrow evening. Any questions? All right then. We ended with Article 17 last night, and as I had announced yesterday evening, we are flipping the order of Articles 19 and 18. So Article 19 is the partial ban on marijuana zoning bylaw. I recognize Mr. Gambino to make the motion.
I move that the town vote to amend the zoning bylaws as written for Article 19 in the town warrant.
Thank you. And is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Mr. Gambino, you have 8 minutes.
Okay.
And if we could bring down the lights, thank you.
Somebody. Yep.
You don't have your presentation memorized?
You don't have my presentation?
Oh, wait, did we just have it labeled for Article 18?
Yeah, we had it labeled for Article 18.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
'Cause
I
we
should have
switched the order
clarified that
recently.
with you, Carolyn.
I got my laptop.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, okay. No. Okay, no, this is the new USB-C, so you don't have that, do you? Okay. Well, let me send it to you right now. Can I do that? Okay. Yeah, anyone have a USB-C dongle?
Peter, can you email it to her?
Well, that's what she's seeing if I can. I can email it to her.
Okay. So, get all this stuff straightened out in advance so we don't have glitches like this, but sometimes it happens. I'd like to, while you're working on that, unless there's any objection from the meeting, I'd like to just skip over and go to Article 21, which is the Public Safety Communications Equipment Tower Lease. And I would like to recognize Mr. Lewis to make the, actually, I'm sorry, we had a motion and a second. Could I have a motion to table the consideration of Articles 18 through 20 until after Article 21? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, Mr. Lewis.
I move that the town vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to execute one or more leases for space on wireless communications as written in the warrant book.
Thank you. And is there a second?
Second.
Could I have the lights on the stage, please? Mr. Lewis.
As
Dr. Lewis, I'm sorry.
part of the ongoing public safety communication system project, the town will need to enter into new leases on existing privately owned telecommunications towers at 871 Westford Street and 1022 Bedford Road. This article authorizes the Board of Selectmen to enter into these new agreements.
Thank you. And the Board of Selectmen voted unanimously to support this article. Were there recommendations from any other town boards or committees to report? Okay, seeing none. Any questions or comments on this? Mr. Friedman.
David Friedman, Hutchins Road. I'd just like to clarify, the description, I believe, flips the two addresses, that it's actually 871 Bedford Road and 1022 Westford Street, just to be clear.
Thank you. So that's just a clarification of the summary. It doesn't actually affect the motion itself.
In case anybody's wondering. And-
Good, thank you.
And as a member of the group that's moving this forward, this doesn't actually mean that the leases will be signed. It just authorizes the town to do them if need be.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, I believe we're ready to move to a vote. We are voting on Article 21, the authorization to the Board of Selectmen to enter into leases for a public safety tower. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? And Sharmili, what do we have over in the cafeteria?
Ayes have it.
Was that unanimous? Could you press the button?
One person didn't vote.
Oh, okay, well, if they didn't vote, it's, we don't count that anyway, so that is a unanimous vote of those who did vote, and I so declare the motion carries. Are we ready to go back to Article 19? Okay, thank you for doing that, and we'll, if we could get the lights on the stage. The motion was already made, so we can proceed directly to the presentation.
Okay, great. Good evening. Was pleased to be the first presenter, but now that I'm the second, I'm still pretty happy about it, so thanks. What I want to talk to you guys tonight is about zoning for recreational marijuana facilities in the town of Carlisle. What are we asking the town to do? We're asking the town to vote on 2 zoning bylaw amendments tonight. Both of these will require a 2/3 majority to pass, and we're also going to ask the town to vote on 2 ballot questions in the May 7th election for the town. Okay? I'm going to get to why we're doing this. First of all, I want to start with a little bit of background. What the recreational marijuana mass law allows is for possession, use, distribution, cultivation of marijuana for recreational use. But it also allows towns to regulate the commerce of marijuana products and accessories in their town. So what we're going to ask tonight is we're going to put in front of you guys some proposed zoning bylaws. These regulate the commerce and zoning of recreational marijuana facilities. They do not apply to personal consumption. There's no no changes to the substance of the zoning bylaws that we already have for the medical-related facilities in town. Okay, so going back now, the state defines 8 marijuana establishments. These are retailers, cultivators, craft cooperatives, which are a combination of businesses other than retailers that have a limited space and a limited size, product manufacturers, transporters, research facilities, laboratories, and micro businesses. So where we are right now with this is that we've already established a temporary moratorium that expired on 12/31/2018. We went to go renew it as many towns did, but by then the bylaw, when we passed the second moratorium, the Cannabis Commission had not finished all of their regulations. However, by the time the AG got to it, the Attorney General, so the Attorney General had started declining all the temporary moratoriums. So right now, the town's moratorium did expire on 12/31/18, so we kind of have to act to get some sort of zoning in place for this as quick as possible. If no local restrictions are adopted in the zoning bylaws and at town election, then the state law will allow one of those each type of establishments in our town. Now, it doesn't mean it's a free-for-all. They're still subject to state licensing, and they're still subject to what's called a host community agreement, which is negotiated by our Board of Selectmen. But it's still much better to have zoning bylaws in place that can regulate the commerce of this if we choose to go that way. What the planning board did to get to where we are today is we did the first moratorium, attempted the second. We've had 2 public meetings at planning board to gather information from the town. That second public meeting, we included a specialist from our town council to advise us on what other towns are doing and what a town like us should be looking at to do. From there, we adopted a town-wide survey where we got 300+ responses, and then we drafted the bylaws based on all this feedback from the public meetings, town council, and the surveys. So what we presented in the survey was a permanent town-wide ban on all recreational marijuana facilities, a zoning bylaw to adopt and regulate the full state statutes, just meaning that, hey, we can apply zoning to those full statutes, but we weren't regulating or prohibiting anything that the state allowed. And then the last one was kind of somewhere in the middle, right, where we said, hey, let's adopt a zoning bylaw, and then let's do a subset of the state statutes limiting the type and the number of facilities. Oh, that slide was not. Okay, that was not the last one I sent to Wayne, but so what we had is we had 321 responses. We had 81% of people in favor of limiting marijuana in this town in some fashion. We had 58% of the people in the survey basically in favor of a complete ban. So while the first preference was for the complete ban, what we asked on top of that is if you were in favor of just a limited ban, what would people be in favor of in this town? What would they most like to see or most like to limit? The number one thing that people wanted to limit in this town was retailers. I don't think that surprised many people here. But the two things that did come up that people would say, hey, give it a chance, would be cultivators and craft cooperatives. Now, one thing about cultivators that I need to bring up is when we think of a cultivator in town, we're not thinking of Clark Farm. The cultivators in the marijuana industry are indoors, in buildings or containers. They're not open fields, green pastures, and things like that that we're used to in town. So what we're asking tonight is two specific things. Article 18 is a townwide ban on all recreational marijuana facilities. Again, does not affect anything about personal use or consumption. Article 19 is just a partial ban, limiting the zoning to one cultivator and one craft cooperative only, with a location possible only outside of the town center in the currently established business districts. Okay, so when we did this, we also took a look at what other towns around us are doing. Concord has a partial ban, no retail establishments. Bedford has a partial ban, no retail establishments. Acton, Westford, and Chelmsford all have full bans. And Billerica has a small zoning district along Route 3. It starts at the jail and goes up Route 3. And otherwise, they don't allow it outside of that small district. So here's a map, right? If you look here, you know, that's a small zoning district that I was referring to in Billerica. Otherwise, all these towns around us are red. They're basically no marijuana facilities in that red area. These two towns, Concord and Bedford, are partial with no retail establishments. I'm going to skip over these and come back to them. So what's being asked of the town tonight is this. We're going to ask you guys to vote on two articles when we need the 2/3 majority because they are zoning articles. Next Tuesday, we're going to ask you to vote on a ballot question. This is a simple majority, 51%, 50.1%, whatever. These two articles and these two ballot questions have to be in sync. So for the article on the total ban, there'll be a ballot question number 3 for a total ban. And for the Article 19, the partial ban, there'll also be a question on the ballot for a partial ban. So I'm going to go to the quick version of how it'll work. If the full ban passes here tonight and the full ban passes at the ballot, the town will have a full prohibition in effect. If the full ban fails for any reason here or on the ballot, but the partial ban passes here and the ballot, then a partial ban will be in effect. So now if either of these fail, I got a quick update from town council as we were discussing back there tonight. If either of these fail, if all 4 of them fail across everything, then we are unprotected. We have no zoning bylaws. So we really encourage people to vote on one of these tonight. However, if something does pass at the town ballot, there is a caveat where we will have a special permitting process in effect, but no prohibition and no zoning other than the special permitting process. So what I ask is that if you support the full ban, please support the partial ban as well, because if the full ban does end up failing, then we would really like the partial ban to pass. Okay.
Thank you.
Oop, don't want that. Just minimize it.
Okay. So this actually, ending on that note, this is a good reminder. In addition to these marijuana articles, should either of them pass tonight, we do need people to come to the town election next Tuesday to vote as well. And there are a number of other articles, such as the police station last night, since that's a Prop 2.5 override. Those also need to be approved at the ballot. So just want to remind people that sometimes we're not just done here even when we vote at town meeting. Okay. With this article, our recommendations, I'm sorry, I need to flip to the right page here. Board of Selectmen were in favor of this one. Voting unanimously. Planning Board was a unanimous 6-0 vote, and you should have their report available in writing. Did any other town boards or committees take a position on Article 19? Okay. With that, the floor is open for discussion. At microphone 5, please.
Sam Verge, 29 Indian Hill. I'm curious, why a ban? We voted to legalize it recreationally, and now we're trying to ban it. Is it fear? Is it ignorance? Cannabis isn't the devil's lettuce. It's changed a lot since then. All I've heard all last night, and probably for the rest of tonight, is how we're in dire straits for money. This report was really one-sided and biased, in my opinion. It's all negative, negative, negative. Has anyone looked at maybe what a 22,000 square foot growing facility would bring in for tax revenue for property taxes? I own 2 businesses. I pay property taxes. I'll tell you what, the property taxes I pay would fund most of this. So I'm not sure where we're going with this. I think people need to have a real vote, not made out of fear and ignorance. And I really feel like that's where we're going with this. Prohibition is not a good word. It's a bad word. You know, we allow firms to sell alcohol. Fact, it's a lot more alarming and damaging than cannabis is. So again, I'd like to know why everybody is so uptight about this. It just doesn't, it's 2019, not 1950. So where are we going? We need money. Why would we shut this out? Makes no sense to me.
Okay, thank you. And no applause, we don't, if those of you who weren't here last night, let me just repeat it. Have no applause, no boos, just respectful listening to everybody. At microphone 2, please.
Skip Tappan, 285 Fifth Street. For the partial, I understand, so there's 8 potential types of businesses, and we're suggesting that 2 of the 8 would be on the partial, would be allowed? Is that, first off, is that a correct understanding? And secondly, could you, since we talked about those 2, could you give a little more definition of what those 2 are, a little more detail, so I understand which ones we would be allowing, please?
Mr. Gambino?
Sure.
Please address.
Yeah, the 2 businesses were cultivators, which is a growing facility. The state mandates cultivators to be a certain size. I can't remember the exact size. I think it's 100,000 square feet. The smaller one is a craft cooperative. That's a combination of the 6 others, not including retailers, but it's limited in square foot to, and it's more of a small business model than the other businesses, which could be a large business.
And okay, follow-up question?
Yes, please.
And so the result of what they're then doing is they're then selling it and distributing it other places? What's trying to understand the results?
Correct. Yeah, neither of those would be direct to consumer. Both of those would be growing and wholesaling to other places.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. At microphone 1, please.
Bob Supnick, Heald Road. I will support the partial ban. That's what we're discussing. And to the comment about whether there is a fear factor, I would point more to the experience of towns that have allowed retailing and the traffic and congestion problems it has created. You may have seen some of the news stories of huge parking problems, and in one town they had to introduce a lottery system so the people could go. We are not in a position in Carlisle with our sort of very limited infrastructure to support anything like that. So I agree with the partial ban and particularly no retailing. Thank you.
Thank you. At microphone 3, please.
David Erickson, 237 Fisk Street. I have to say I agree with the first speaker. I don't really see that much difference between marijuana and alcohol. And in particular, I don't see why, I mean, Fern sells alcohol. They did have to get a special permit to do that. If they chose, I don't see why they shouldn't be able to sell marijuana as well. So I certainly object to the restriction that any activities have to be outside the central business area. Certainly the issue of congestion could be an issue only because every town around us is banning it. I mean, again, we've made it legal. Why is everybody banning it? Certainly it should be, people should use it carefully, and you know, they should treat it like alcohol, which is also a drug which was previously illegal and was made legal. So anyway, I would like to see all of these measures fail.
Thank you. At microphone 4, please.
John Valentine, 268 Fisk Street. Since some of us may not have read through all the bylaw and understand it, I wonder if you could just summarize what is said in the partial ban bylaw, so at least we have some understanding of what we are voting on, and that would be helpful.
I think you already did that. Microphone 1, please.
I disagree, Wayne. I don't understand it.
So,
If there's more specific questions, I'll allow Mr. Gambino to read them, but to respond to them. But the opening presentation is for the general overview. Microphone 1, please. Mr.
David Friedman, Hutchins Road. So the planning board, as Mr. Gambino pointed out, didn't address this based on their own sort of view of what things should be. They did a survey of the town, and in response to what the town's citizens said in response to that survey, felt that it was appropriate to bring these two articles to town meeting. I'd also like to point out that the partial ban bylaw is virtually a ban, not through the intent of the planning board, but through the specificity of the business district, not in the center business district. For those who don't pay attention to the zoning map that you could only get in certain places in town, the business district that's not the center business district is 3 small parcels along Bedford Road, each of which is essentially, per the bylaw, excluded from being somewhere where you can have a marijuana establishment because they are within 1,000 feet of a town-owned property that allows passive recreation, or one of them is Kimball's, which is restricted for all kinds of things to essentially just an ice cream stand, and is also a place where, as we know, kids congregate. So essentially what we have before us tonight are these 2 bans. So unless you are in favor of letting anything in, including a retail establishment, what I would recommend is voting for both of these things, both of these bylaws, 19 and 18, and then at the ballot, vote for 19 and 18 on the off chance that if you're in favor of the ban completely and it doesn't pass at the ballot, that at least we have that partial ban in place. But the only options you really have here, as far as I see it, is rejecting both and allowing everything open with no bylaw in place to regulate it whatsoever, including retail establishments, or vote for both here and at the ballot.
Mr. Friedman, could you just please identify quickly for the meeting the 3 small business districts outside the center that you referred to?
Well, it's 1 business district, but it's 3 parcels. One is at just before River Road, heads off of Bedford Road. One is the Kimball's property, and the last one is at where Maple Street
Carlisle Auto Body?
cuts off there. It's not exact, yeah. And those are the only, that is the business district other than the center business district. And the bylaw as written, because it was adapted from the medical marijuana bylaw, is limited to those same locations. When the medical marijuana bylaw was passed, the one that's at Maple Street was a valid place where a establishment could go in, but since then the town has purchased the Woodward land, which has a CR on it, which allows passive recreation, is within 1,000 feet of that property, and per this bylaw would now not be allowed. The bylaw also picked up from the medical marijuana bylaw hours of operation and limits the hours of operation, and says in no event shall a PME be open and or operating between the hours of 8 p.m. and 8 a.m., which probably precludes any growing establishment because essentially they're indoors and the whole business model is growing 24/7 under lights. So inadvertently, the partial ban is also a ban. And again, the only option we have before us tonight is these 2 bylaws or neither.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. At microphone 2, please.
I'd just like to speak to...
Please identify yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. Drew Kissinger, 41 Curve Street. I'd just like to speak to land conservation and tax revenue. So I know that my research indicates that the original Massachusetts recreational marijuana laws were put in place without considering the tremendous upside to small farmers in Massachusetts, and the craft cooperative and the micro businesses were added later to answer that question. They're in the law specifically so that small, most likely organic producers in Massachusetts can grow a crop that wholesales for $900 a pound. There's nothing else, there's no other cash crop in Mass that you can rely on as a farmer to stay in business and make money. The flip side of it is the towns that allow the sale of marijuana at any level are allowed to, they get a special kickback. Marijuana is taxed at about 25%. I don't have all the figures exactly in front of me. Maybe the speaker does. And then towns can assess a further, they get an automatic 3% kickback, and they can assess a further 3% tax on top of that. So it's like a 6% tax on something that's tremendously valuable. The way I see it, we constantly struggle with conserving land. I'm on the CCF board. There's a lot of farmland that gets snapped up, and we praise ourselves for working out these deals where, boy, only a third of this wonderful piece of property that's been in continuous cultivation since we exterminated all the Indians is now going to only have 8 giant houses on it. Isn't this great? Well, the reality is, if a farmer could make 50 grand by growing 100 pounds of marijuana a year in a greenhouse and selling it wholesale and developing a craft microbrew style branding where people are looking for a premium organic product, we wouldn't have to have people selling off these parcels of land. We'd flip the dynamic around to some extent, and the town would also benefit with tax revenue. And I think it's very short-sighted to throw all this away. I think that the way this bylaw that it was put forward was really slipshod and poorly thought through, and it's really too bad. If we pass this up, it's just another big opportunity missed, and we'll all be wondering why we don't have any money, and all of our land keeps getting sold for big houses, and that's it. We owe it to ourselves to not pass these. I think we're owed actually a real set of zoning bylaws that actually
You're at
address
about
the issue.
3 minutes. Please wrap up. Okay, thank you. At microphone 1, get to.
Steve Tropoli, Westford Street. I was wondering if we have any specific information about the amount of money that would be generated by each of the grow, cultivate / retail facilities for Carlisle, and I'll take the answer to that after I sit down, but I'll just do one quick comment. I work across the street from Patriot Care in Lowell, which is a recreational facility for purchasing, and they don't seem to have a lot of traffic issues.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gambino, could you address the question about potential revenue?
Yeah, I would love to. Can you go enlarge it again?
Maybe if we could, if you're going to use the slide, could we have the lights down, please?
Okay. So this is, I'll say the revenue has been the #1 question asked. So as you see last night, I made an,
Speak into the mic.
Okay, sure. This has been the #1 question asked, is about revenue opportunities. We sat here last night and we presented a budget. We all are like, hey, we really got to, look at our pocketbooks now because we're increasing the taxes. Everything comes out of everything comes out of the taxpayers. But I got to say, for the recreational marijuana, it is set up for two entities to make money: the people selling the marijuana and the state. Right? There is a high tax, like that gentleman brought up. But the towns and municipalities are limited to 3%, and it's only 3% off from revenue, off from retail sales, right? Overwhelmingly, in the 80%, people on that survey came back and said, we do not want a retailer in town. So that's what the planning board was acting off from. So let's go through a little example here. And I'll get back to the other 3%, which the gentleman brought up because he was correct about that. So let's say marijuana is retailing for $300 an ounce, which is a going price. right now, or when the retailers opened up last year in November, when the first retailers came out. They also say that that is going to be dropping, okay? Maximum purchase per customer is 1 ounce, okay? It's $300. Average purchase price since they've opened till now is about $75 per customer, right? So let's say we have 1,000 customers a week, 75K a week, times 52 weeks, that's $3.9 million a year. Pretty good little business for the business owner, great for the state. What we get out of it is $117,000 annually, right? What we also have to do to get out of it is we have increased traffic around town where we do not have the infrastructure to support increased traffic. We have a police presence 24/7 in these facilities. The police have to be monitoring and patrolling these facilities. We have a lot of different things we'll be introducing to the town that, quite frankly, great, we go through a master planning process, and that's a culture and that's the direction we want to go, great, but that is not the culture of the town now, and that is not the direction that we've seen when we've been talking to people around the town, okay? And 1,000 customers a week is a pretty high number, right? Let's say it's only 500 customers a week. That cuts those revenues in town for half, 58,000, right? That's not a lot of money to really have the town go in that direction now without it really being planned out. Now, I want to address what some people were saying about this being poorly planned.
Tell you what, why don't, I just want you to answer that direct question. I will give you an opportunity to respond to the general arguments that have been made.
Well, one more thing is he brought up another 3%. That's called a host community agreement fee. Host community agreement fee is only for direct reimbursed expenses, and it is capped at a certain amount. So it's going to be, it's obviously the 3%, of their side of the revenue, not ours. So we can only submit that to directly reimburse expenses that the town has incurred. And there's been some back and forth with that with people that have been doing it already with disagreements on either sides about, hey, is this a real expense of the town, or is this really like a fixed expense the town already has? So we have to be able to prove these expenses to be able to reimburse them. So that 6% that we get is only be for retailers, and it's not always a 6%. It's less than that. So this great utopic land of everyone making money off of marijuana is great for the business, it's great for the state, it's not so great for the municipalities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. At microphone 5, please.
Good evening, Russell Ruthin, 136 Pine Brook Road. I favor a complete ban and oppose any Articles 19, 20, or any exceptions at this time. The reason for this is, one, because a partial ban will open a legal loophole for the town. There are cases such as Charlton, Mass., where they've partially legalized marijuana sales and have been now plagued by lawsuits from big business, and you can read it up, you can look it up on your iPhones right now, have been plagued by lawsuits and are not having the town's views followed or bylaws followed because business came in, sued them, and state courts actually agreed with them, okay? And the state of Massachusetts, I think, has found that if the town gives any kind of exception to the ban, you open yourself up to possible other big businesses coming in and exploiting the town's intent. And you can all look that one up. The second reason is the partial ban at this time is a poor strategy for the town in this sense. If we have an interested cultivator or another interested business, let them come to town, let them make a case. Let them present what the revenues are going to be for the town. Let us examine those. Let us understand what the impacts are going to be. What is it going to do to our water supply when THC gets into the water supply? What is it going to do to our security? Excuse me. Excuse me. In large-scale establishments, you have these issues. What is it going to do to the town in terms of our security costs? What are the total impacts? Even when we let Ferns have a liquor license, the whole town examined that liquor license in great detail before we allowed it. And the point is this: if you're interested in having town's revenues maximized and having the town's interests represented, then have the businesses come, make their case, and then allow the exception. That is a much better negotiating strategy, right? Let the town make the decision. So my question to the town is, why do we have to make the exceptions at this time? Why not take the safer route, have the complete ban, and later make the amendments?
Thank you. Please.
Sam Verge, 29 Indian Hill. Again, I think the one thing we're not looking at is property taxes. That hasn't come up yet at all. And just to this gentleman's point, THC in the water supply, that's not how it works. You have to actually light the pot or some other way to get the THC out. But anyways, but I'm curious, again, what would a 20,000, 22,000 greenhouse bring in for tax revenue for property taxes? No one's talking about that. It's a lot of money. I know what I pay for a 4,000 square foot home on 4 acres. I can only imagine what that's going to be like.
Thank you. Mr. Gambino, let me give you an opportunity to respond to the general arguments that you've been hearing.
Okay, so this is a very new opportunity for the state, right? This is, all the towns are kind of going through a similar struggle that we are to try to understand these laws, to try to regulate the commerce in their town, and to go forward into the future. What we found so far is that the towns that have allowed it, they're coming across a lot of growing pains and a lot of problems in the town. They're coming across security issues. They're coming across resource issues with water and electricity. They're coming across issues with people coming in and the congestion from it. This is not something that the planning board thought that the town was going to be able to go forward with in a fashion, be an early adopter, let's put it that way. That's why we did the survey. And when the survey came back, that survey basically across town, it was put out to everybody that we knew with every electronic channel that we could find. That came back unanimously not unanimously, but very, very close, like 80+% with people favoring some sort of ban. So that's the direction the planning board took. Now, with these laws are modeled off from what other towns did, and they're modeled off from a bylaw that we currently have in place for medical marijuana zoning. So that's why these bylaws are what they are. Now, are they permanent? Can they ever be changed? No, they're not. We come back to, like the gentleman over at microphone 5 was saying a few minutes earlier, let somebody come to town. Let somebody present to us a very good business model for the town that covers these things. It covers the resource usage. It covers the security. It covers how are we going to manage this in our town. And you know what? We can be back here next year talking about this again with some real project in mind. But in the meantime, we need to do something to protect the town so that the zoning is not, that there is zoning, that there is something in place, either prohibition or a zoning, to make sure that we regulate this so the town can get in front of it and control it instead of trying to play catch up when someone else has already come in and we're trying to fight the battle after it's already started. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DeCock?
Jonathan DeCock, 130 Oak Knoll Road. I found Mr. Friedman's argument very interesting in that it appears that both of these are full bans, but in the process you answered one question about a cultivator that had to be over 100,000 square feet, and I know what the bylaw says it has to be less than 20,000 square feet. Could you clarify that, please?
I might need town council to help me with that one, Tom.
I'm sorry. Mr. DeCock, could you clarify where you were looking at the 100,000 and 25,000? And feel free to raise the mic so you don't have to bend over so much.
Not sure how to do that. So it's section 51141 that says no permitted marijuana establishment shall be located within a building or structure having a gross floor area of more than 20,000 square feet. And I had not heard of the 100,000 thing before, but I believe Mr. Gambino mentioned it earlier in response to a different question.
Actually, Tom, I think I can address that. So these aren't in conflict, right? This is referring to the building size of the square foot. That's a building, right? A lot of the times you see these things being built in pre-made pods that they ship out, growing pods, growing containers. The state law mandates square footage in a totally different way that we do. Our square footage is building square footage. The state's square footage is shelving spaces. It's growing square footage, not the building square footage. So those aren't in conflict. We wanted to limit the building size to be 20,000 square feet. Thanks. I had to understand it first. Did I get that right, Tom? Pretty much.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Hedden.
Henry Hedden, 98 East Reading Drive. As someone previously pointed out, the partial ban would be a de facto complete ban, if I understood correctly. Is it true that there are not currently any places in the town that would meet the requirements set out in the partial ban?
Could you address that, please?
That is true. The conservation on the Woodard land was recently actually passed through prior to us pushing this or drafting this bylaw, which started last September. So that is true, and what I would encourage is that if people want to change that and want to go forward, that they come to the planning board. That's one of the things that, you know, I was just saying in the last spiel, is this is not, the zoning bylaw can be changed at town meeting again. And as we grow to adapt, we do this all the time. We'll come back and we'll say, hey, we notice there's a flaw or the zoning bylaw needs to be changed, and we can change it after that. But that right now, unfortunately, that is true, that pretty much it's limited to, I believe, every parcel that is in the zoning district is within a CR, 1,000 feet of a CR or other recreational facility. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So I do want to ask I'm not going to cut off debate now, but I do want to ask that anyone else wishing to speak, please get yourself to a microphone and make sure that you're both brief and not repeating things that have been covered before, because I think we're getting close. At microphone 3, Mr. Erickson.
David Erickson, 237 Fisk Street. So it appears that really we're voting for a total ban on both measures. So Article 20 sounds like it's been, at this point, is really poorly thought out. People say, well, we can always change it. It takes a 2/3 vote to change it, which is a very high bar. My guess is once we put this in, we're not going to be making any exceptions. So it seems to me that we should vote against this and come up with a better proposal. We can always revisit this next year, as people have said about making revisions. Let's get it right the first time and not have to try to get 2/3 to make a change, which is not going to happen.
Thank you. At microphone 2, please.
Eva Mustafi, 1173 North Road.
Could you speak a little
Sure.
more loudly? Thank you.
Eva Mustafi, 1173 North Road. So my question, well, I can't really understand why we're bringing this up for vote, because we have voted, everyone in Carlisle has voted for allowing recreational marijuana in town. And I'm not understanding why we're going through this process, as there are natural barriers already in Carlisle to prevent recreational marijuana or even medical marijuana businesses coming into town. So those opportunities will be very hard to begin with. And then most of all, I've heard saying about, oh my God, we got to get these businesses to stand in front of us and propose and say how much they're going to bring to our town. Well, that happens, that feedback, they have to come in and stand in front of us, because they need to obtain a host community agreement, which is not easy to come by. And we are a small community, we know each other, we talk to each other, so they really have to get people on board to allow businesses to come in. We have just voted for master plan, so why don't we just wait and see what kind of data comes back? All our taxes are going up, our needs are still going up. At schools are needing money. We want all these great things for our town, yet our property taxes are going up and we have no other revenue options. Let's wait and see what the master plan people come up with, and then make a decision. There's no real rush, as we already have all these natural barriers to allowing businesses. And there's also traffic. I've heard something about traffic. Been traffic because there is no merchandise. And what I see, if Barica is going to open up the retail, well, this is going to be our residents spending our money in Barica right before getting to our town. Why Concord doesn't come and purchase and support our town? Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone 1, please.
I would note for anybody who doesn't think that it's feasible for someone to come into town and make the pitch and then change a bylaw, later, very shortly, we'll be debating a solar bylaw, which is to allow a very specific proposal by a business entity, and the town will be able to vote on a bylaw based on understanding exactly what it entails. And so it's not far-fetched at all to imagine that being a reasonable approach where we have the information we need to move ahead with a bylaw. So it's not true that if we vote a ban now that we won't be able to revisit it, as the solar bylaw that we'd passed previously that limited solar to a very limited area, and now we have a proposal from a business entity to put it in other areas. We have a bylaw before us that I expect will be debated and perhaps well received. And it's a simple process.
Thank you. Microphone 5.
Josh Kaplotsky, Nichols Lane. Yes, we can amend bylaws. However, with the 2/3 barrier, that creates a very high bar. And we found that in the case of solar with respect to community solar garden, which was turned down an expansion of a solar district because it failed to meet that 2/3 bar. I don't believe we should support either partial or full ban. And I believe the data showing the scare tactic of 1,000 visitors into town per week needs to be put in context. Those who try to get through the center of town, either in the morning or in the late afternoon, will discover on an average day hundreds and hundreds of cars. I don't know the exact number, but if the daily load were 140 cars per day spread out over the whole day, that would be insignificant compared to what we see currently in center of town traffic. Lastly, I do work across the street from a different medical and recreational dispensary. And while the first week or two there was a lot of traffic and a lot of police presence, it's calmed down within just a few weeks. Retail would be the most disruptive to the community. While any business would put a load on community services, I believe that load would be less than a new crop of houses would be and the attendant residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone 1, please.
Gambino, 280 Stony Gate. So what this is about tonight is a zoning bylaw. And yes, Massachusetts supported recreational marijuana use. Carlisle does too. This isn't about fear-mongering or, not in my backyard. Zoning is about deciding as a town what types and what placement of facilities we would be interested in pursuing or allowing people to pursue. So it's not in my backyard, it's how do we want to manage this in our backyard, basically, So, and what I'm hearing is that all the towns surrounding us have zoning bylaws in place. And tonight, I actually didn't know how I would vote on the full ban, but after hearing Mr. Ruthin speak and Mr. Friedman about the upcoming project that we're going to discuss tonight, I think I know how I would vote, because yes, we can, as a town, we can decide.
Thank you. Microphone 5, please.
George Vendura, 898 Maple Street. I'm still confused, Mr. Gambino. Simple question. A yes is a partial ban. A no is no ban or total ban?
So are you referring
Please
to-
answer that.
Okay. So referring to 19 specifically, because that's what we're debating right now, right? The partial ban. Okay? A no on that, on 19 alone, would mean nothing is in place. Okay. Let me go back to my slide, because that's the best way. This is something that has to.
Let me clarify it for some of the other people, right?
Yeah.
I'm for a position of no ban. I want free marijuana, no bans, no restrictions.
Yep.
How do I vote that with all these little chunks, okay?
You vote.
Just tell me how to vote, and like my mother, 94, I'll just write it down.
I don't think I'm going to answer and tell you how to vote. Here is how it is.
Hypothetically, if one wanted to know.
Yes. So if one wanted to know that they wanted a full ban or no ban? No ban.
No restrictions on marijuana. How do I vote, please? I'll
If you
tell
want
my
no
mother.
restrictions on marijuana at all, which means that we're legally up to having one of those eight of each type of facilities in town anywhere,
Yes.
then you would vote no to both things tonight.
No on all things?
No on both things.
Both things.
Yes.
Okay, I'll tell my mother. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a very useful question. Mr. Gambino and I have been speaking for several months, trying to figure out how to get this most clearly in front of the meeting so that people do understand the choice. However you want to go on it, it is important that everyone understands. So to be clear, I'll try to restate it and ask Mr. Gambino to correct me if I misstate anything. There is no complete and total anything goes. If Carlisle does not adopt any particular zoning bylaw, then the state laws take over, and those allow, or is they require, is it allow or require? Allow one of each of those 8 types of establishments. So, and those companies would come in. They still have to go through the normal requirements of any business trying to locate in town. The partial ban would allow 2 of those types in theory. Mr. Friedman has pointed out that the way the bylaw was drafted, practically speaking, those at the moment turn into a partial ban because those locations are within a total ban, thank you. Though in effect turns into a total ban. I don't know if the planning board has any future plans to address that issue, but the partial ban effectively becomes a full ban for the current point in time. And then the third choice is the full ban. If you vote yes on either the full or the partial ban, those still do not go into effect unless they're approved at the polls next week. Did I get all that right? And I'm sure it's as clear as mud to everyone. At microphone 2.
Carly Cox, 318 Maple Street. I just have a quick question. So there was a comment earlier made that if we voted no on both of these, that we still would have control through the host community agreement. I was just wondering if there could be some more information about what exactly that process entails in terms of, I know there's sometimes things where you can accept things or not, and how much latitude does the selectmen have to push back on things in the host community agreement? How easy would it be for a business to come in and say, basically kind of force us to take something that we didn't necessarily, or the selectmen to take something that we didn't necessarily want?
Can you address that,
So
please?
the host community agreement is more like a business agreement. It's an arrangement and a contract between the town and the business about how they're going to operate their business. But what we do lose in that case is we lose any zoning control. And that's the difference between the two. Zoning is going to dictate placement, location, accepted use in that district. The host community agreement is more about operating the business hours, what the town expects for their host community agreement coming back up to that 3%. Think of it in terms of like the liquor license that goes to Ferns. It's along those lines of how you're operating your business to conduct business, more than different than what the zoning is.
And are there any, just a quick follow-up, are there any existing zoning bylaws that don't obviously apply to marijuana specifically, but that apply to, say, retail or any of those other categories, if you go beyond it, that would take effect to restrict the locations?
There's a little bit of a gray area there, right? If we don't have a prohibition in place or a zoning bylaw in place, what ends up happening is that if a company comes in and finds us overly restrictive, just like I don't want to say the word, so I was going to say something that can be contentious in town, but if they come in and they find that our laws, without a zoning bylaw being in place, are overly restrictive, then they can look to try to make the town accept it in an outside of the business district use. So for some of these establishments, they would have to reside in the business district, like a retailer, for example. So that would be town center or those 3 places that we just said. Now, I think we got to take a hard look at that, because I think even without the zoning, those things are going to be overly restrictive at this point, because they're all within areas of public recreation, even the town center zoning district. So I think this is something that has to be looked at outside of these bylaws themselves, because right now, if we're found to be overly restrictive, somebody can come in and it's different from other bylaws. It's more like the housing law, where if we're overly restrictive in something, then they can try to find a way around it. And that's kind of why we want these zoning bylaws in place, and more importantly, a form of prohibition in place.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Levitan, very briefly, I hope.
It will be. Mark Levitin, 105 Wolf Rock Road. That actually just touched on my question, which is if we have no ban whatsoever, where could these, each of one of 8 types of businesses locate? And I think you just hit that.
Okay.
Thank you. So I see Mr. Erickson and Mr. Supnick, both of whom have spoken before. We're only on the second article, and we've got a long warrant. So if you really want to make your statement, please do so, but please be brief.
Question.
Mr. Erickson.
David Erickson, 37 Fisk Street. Since Article 20 is really a ban, as is Article 19.
Sorry, it's 18 and 19.
Article,
Not
right.
19 and 20.
Article 19 is a ban, as is Article 18. I don't know if I can make a motion to table Article 19 and just move directly on to Article 18, because they're both, Article 19 is only confusing the issue.
There's differences in the way the zoning bylaw is written, and we do.
But practically speaking, it's a ban.
No.
Is it possible to make a motion to table?
So the direct answer to your question is yes, you may make, it's the same motion that we did when we had our technical glitch. If you wish to move to table consideration of Article 19 until after we vote on Article 18, you may make that motion if you so choose.
I would like to make a motion to table it for this town meeting.
That's a different motion. And I don't
make that
take
motion?
motions to table it for this town meeting. You can table it to a time certain, but to say indefinite is basically to vote it down, and I don't
Well, being as how
allow that.
it's the same as Article 18, but okay, then.
So no motion then? Okay. Thank you. Mr. Supnick, briefly, please.
For clarification, does the state law contain any restrictions on the locations of PMEs?
Could you please answer that?
Basic setback setback restrictions from the public use facilities, childcare facilities, and things like that. Otherwise, they don't get into local zoning. You know what I mean?
Okay. Thank you. Yes, sir. Very briefly.
Yes,
Microphone
I'd like
3.
to, Ms. Russell Ruthin again, 136 Pine Brook. I'd like to make that motion that gentleman just tried to make, which is to temporarily stop discussion on 19 and vote on 18 first.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay. We have a motion and a second. I don't think we need any debate on this, do we? Okay, very good. Let's go immediately to a vote. If you vote yes on this, we will suspend the debate on Article 19 and just move on to 18, consider 18, vote on that, and then come back and vote on 19. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All opposed, say nay. Nay. Okay, and I assume, Sharmley, we still only have 2 or 3 people in the cafeteria, is that right?
We've got 4.
4, okay, I don't think you would have overruled us here. So motion fails to carry a majority. So we're still on Article 19. Seeing no one at the microphones, I believe we're ready for a vote. So this is a vote on Article 19, which is the partial ban. This requires a 2/3. I suspect we may need to have a hand count, but let's try just holding up. All those in favor, please hold up your pink slip. Okay. All those opposed, please hold up your pink slip. I do not believe, what's the count in the cafeteria, please, Sharmley?
2 and 2.
2 and 2. Yeah, this is a 2/3 vote. Yes. Yes. It's my judgment that this failed to obtain 2/3 majority. And Do you need 6 more? Just to be clear, any 7 voters may challenge the moderator's call. So we have 1. Are there 6 others? Okay, we do. All right, so tellers, please. So, would the tellers come down front, please? Or tellers all at your location. So, anyone who is not a teller must be sitting down, please. If you're not sitting down, your vote will not be counted. So the people who are standing are the tellers. The tellers look to see who they are who are counting your section. When they go like this, you can drop your hands. Okay? Don't want to have anyone have any problems. All those in favor, please hold up your card. We're voting on Article 19. I don't know which you're voting for. The vote right now is those who favor passage of Article 19.
Or you're Mr. Goodbar.
If we have a teller over in the cafeteria, please proceed to take the no votes there, even though we're not ready to do the no votes here yet. But cafeteria, just get it done quickly, please. Okay, are we all set on the yeas here? Are we all set on the yeas? No, we're still.
Yeah, I don't need that. Yeah.
Okay, in this center section in the back, the yeas, please raise your hand again. Okay, we're ready for the nay vote now, all tellers? We're good? Okay. Those who oppose Article 19, please raise your slips. If we could get someone to raise the lights on the stage, bring the FinCom and selectmen out of darkness.
We're always there.
The problem is it gets really hot over here.
Well, actually, it's a lot more calming to have them off. But of course,
That's because Nathan's talking.
Radiating.
Are you done up here?
You just like him.
Well, you don't sit to his left at the meetings, you know, you should start.
Yeah. I'm going to screw you guys up.
Mary.
Mary.
They already counted us.
Counters?
Okay, are we fully counted in this center section here? Okay, you can drop your hands. If people would like to take a stretch break, please feel free to stand up at this point, and we'll have the tally in a minute. Don't go too far.
Wayne. Wayne, can you see if we've been counted? Can you just check it?
Baking trail mix, huh?
It would be nice if we knew who our counter was and if they would let us know when they get us.
We're just complaining.
That's right. It's our prerogative.
I don't want electronic.
You know, it's partly because of training. Yeah.
Interesting thing is if this fails, the other one will surely fail.
Hey, Wayne. It seems like people are getting ready to read. They better realize.
What happens on Tuesday?
Yes, exactly. Well, that's only 50% vote, though.
Oh, it doesn't? Oh, okay. Okay.
We can.
But they can't, if they both voted down here, even a positive one there won't pass.
1, 2, 2, 1, 2.
It has to pass both.
Put a little picture of me. I guess it was probably that's what we did when my son was deployed.
We're going to have a better voting system.
We always take his family
That's not
picture.
working. I have no confidence.
We had a picture of him.
It's like Carrie.
Oh, this is an improvement.
Yeah, it is.
Marginal.
Keeps you from doing that.
Adds up. Yeah, right. Oh, you used to do that too.
I lived near Chicago once.
Early and often.
Early and often. We got it. I used to go into Chicago every weekend. I went to school in Wisconsin. Broadcast. WLS. 50,000.
What do we got here?
I used to listen from Reading, Pennsylvania, listen to CFL.
We got 8.
Yep.
Okay.
Actually, one of the best stories, I always remember this. We used to drive from Columbus, Ohio, later a different school later on, to Florida, and right around Christmas time, and Fort Wayne, Indiana, WOWO. They have late night disc jockey. And he would call Barnes. And if you answered the phone, ho, ho, whoa, whoa, you got a prize. That's your answers. I remember one night he's calling Barnes, the guy said, whoa. You know, no, you gotta say,
Yeah,
ho, ho,
well,
whoa,
the
whoa.
problem is that
Exactly
the next
same
one will
word.
be
10 minutes later,
dependent on
they
this
go,
one.
"Whoa."
We'll do that on some of the others. Okay, thank you. If everyone could please take your seats.
Sid McCoy had the CFL Night Jazz.
The vote was 160 in favor, 114 opposed. The motion fails to carry a 2/3 majority as required, and so the motion fails, and I so declare. We're now back to Article 18. Mr. Gambino, do you want to move the motion?
Okay, I move that the town will vote to amend the zoning. Thank you. I move that the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaw as printed for Article 18 as printed in the town warrant.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Motion has been made and seconded. Mr. Gambino, speak briefly to this, just so we know where we are.
I presented all I need to. I'll be here to answer questions, but otherwise, I defer.
Okay, very good. And on this one, we again had the votes of the Planning Board and the Board of Selectmen both unanimously voted to support Article 18. Is that correct?
No, not for the selectmen.
No, I'm sorry. My mistake. The Planning Board was unanimous 6-0, and the Selectmen was 3-2 to support Article 18. So those are your recommendations. Any other boards or committees? Okay, the floor is open for debate. Anyone wish to speak? If not, I'm happy to move us straight to a vote. Okay, very good. So, Article 18 also requires a 2/3. This is for a complete ban. All those in favor, please hold up your pink slips. Okay, all those opposed, please hold up your pink slips. This one's closer. I'll have to ask the tellers to come out again. So here's what we're going to do. The tellers, please. While the tellers are gathering, first I'm going to ask for the no's, because it's a little bit, there were, I think, fewer, so we're going to do those quickly. And then I will ask for the yeses. Once the tellers have the votes, we're then actually going to go on, as the tabulation is going on, we will then pick up the next article, which is a medical marijuana one, while we're waiting for the vote on this one, okay? So I would ask the no votes, please raise your slips. This is the no votes on Article 20. I'm sorry, 18. I misstated. This is the full ban. No votes on the full ban. Are we complete in the center section? Is anyone counting? Okay, we're still counting the center there. Okay. All right. All those now in favor of Article 18? Okay, this section, we're done. You can drop your hands. Okay, are we completed in back there? Yes, okay, so the voting is complete. As the tellers bring the numbers down to the clerk, we will proceed to Article 20, medical marijuana bylaw amendments. I recognize Mr. Gambino.
I move that we amend the Carlisle zoning bylaw, RE medical marijuana bylaw amendments as printed in the town warrant.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Gambino, please speak to the article.
Sure. Substantively, there's no changes to the zoning bylaw. Basically, what we did is we had to, as we were reviewing the recreational, we were updating the medical marijuana bylaw to meet new state statutes and to basically correct some small errors with the law that was previously printed before. So, you know, if it's all printed in the warrant, I don't want to go through each one of these and bore people since we got to move this along, but if there's any questions about the specific edits that are printed in the warrant, I am here to answer them.
Could you just briefly say a little bit more?
Sure.
Yeah, I appreciate the request about specific edits, but at least just give us why
Sure.
are we doing this?
Well, why we're doing it is to match the new zoning, or the state laws. But specifically what we're doing here is, number one, we're redefining what an RMD is. Basically, the medical marijuana treatment center, that's to match what's in the state statutes. We are we're basically redefining medical marijuana use in the second one as to the state law. And these are just small edits to change the wording so that we match it. We're redefining what marijuana is, again, to match the state law.
Okay, so everything is just housekeeping updates?
Yeah, it's all housekeeping. It was to match the state law, and then there's a couple of errors that you'll see, like where we're replacing words, like in number 9, the word shall be used after the word special permit. So it's all housekeeping stuff. There was no substantive changes to this zoning bylaw from how it's printed today.
Okay, very good. And the recommendations on this one, Planning Board 6-0 in favor, and the selectmen were 5-0 in favor, correct? No other boards or committees had any recommendations. Okay. Before we proceed with the discussion on this, the vote on Article 18, the full ban, was 161 in favor, 111 opposed. That is not 2/3, so the motion fails, and I so declare. So, any discussion on Article 20, medical marijuana? Okay, then let's proceed to a vote. I'm sorry, Mr. Hedden.
I just wanted to clarify that Article 20 will not actually it will change the wordings of the medical marijuana laws, but will not actually affect the regulations in any way.
Please comment.
Correct. It's changing the wording to match the state definitions in the state law, because that was updated when the recreational one was as well. But it's not changing the zoning or permitted use or things like that that are currently in the bylaw.
Okay, thank you. Let's proceed to the vote. All those in favor of Article 20, the amendments to the medical marijuana zoning bylaw. This also is 2/3. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? And in the cafeteria, Sharmali?
Ayes have it.
Was that unanimous or not?
Yes.
Very good. So it is also unanimous here. The motion carries unanimously, and I so declare. We already did Article 21, which enables us to move on to Article 22. I recognize Mr. Ascolillo.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. May come to a shock as to many of you, but I will try to talk less and get through this as fast as possible.
But make the motion first.
Yes, I will. I just had to throw that in. So now I'm going to talk more. Now, I move motion 1 of Article 22 as written in the motion handout.
Is there a second? Okay.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Let's proceed.
So it's the FY20 budget for CPC. Pretty straightforward. 491,000 was collected as the CPA surcharge, so your 2% tax. Your 2% tax. We got about 11.5% match from the state, which was about 53,000, and then we have some interest revenue of about $1,000 for a total budget of $545,000. So as mandated by the state, we have to put at least 10,000 into each of the 3 buckets. So that was done, 54,500 into open space, community housing, and historic. This year we appropriated, or we're asking for an appropriation of 20,000 into the administrative funds. I'll get to that after, but it's going to be motion 4. We're going to use CPA funds to do this. I'll explain all that later, but that's why that number is higher than the 2,000 that we usually ask for. And then 361,500 will go into the reserve. Yeah.
Okay, and when you said that a minimum of 10,000 needs to go into each of the buckets, you did mean 10%,
10%,
correct?
sorry.
Okay,
Yep.
it's 10% of the 545,000. All right, the recommendations on this, the Board of Selectmen voted unanimously in favor for motion 1. RecCom also voted to support, and I believe those are all the only recommendations we had on motion 1. Is that correct? Very good. Floor is open for debate. Mr. Hedden?
Yes. Can you explain why the majority of the budget is allocated for reserve?
Yep, so basically what we do is the state mandates that 10% goes into each of those 3 buckets. The reserve fund, what that does is that carries over into the undesignated fund next year, so that can be used for any purpose. So basically it makes it less restrictive.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, with that, I believe we're ready to move to a vote. This is a majority vote. Motion 1 is the CPA appropriations for FY20. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? And in the cafeteria, Charmaline?
Ayes have it, unanimous.
Okay, we're not quite unanimous here, but the motion does carry by a majority, and I so declare. Motion 2, Mr. Escalillo.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move motion 2 of Article 22 as written in the motion handout.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded.
Yep, thank you.
Please proceed.
So this is a request by the town clerk. A few years ago, Charlene Hinton, when she was the clerk, started this process of preserving and restoring some of the town records. So our new town clerk has picked up the torch and tried to continue this. So she's asking for $16,571. This would be from the Historic Reserve Fund, and the clawback date or the end date would be July 30th, 2022.
Thank you. And the recommendations that we had on this one, again, Board of Selectmen voted unanimously in favor, as did RecCom, also in favor, and I believe those were the only 2 that we had. Correct? Okay, any debate or questions on this one? Okay, seeing none, we're ready to move to a vote. This is allocating $16,571 from the Historic Reserve Fund for the document preservation project. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay, and in the cafeteria, Charmaline?
Ayes have it.
Okay, the motion carries by a majority, and I so declare. On to motion 3.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move motion 3 of Article 22 as written in the motion handout.
Is there a second? Okay, please speak to the article.
So this is $15,000 requested by the Trails Committee. You guys don't have a presentation, do you?
No.
Presentation? Okay. So basically, this is for the restoration and construction of new trails throughout Carlisle. So CPA funds cannot be used for maintenance. So this will not be for that. This is basically where recreation doesn't exist, so new trails where they have to build boardwalks and such, but also too where boardwalks have become unusable. So the last time was, I think, about 5 or 6 years ago that they requested funds, and it was $15,000, and that money's been expended. So that's why this has a later clawback date of 2024. So yeah, $15,000 for 5 years.
Thank you. And the recommendations on this one, again, Selectmen unanimous. Conservation Commission voted to support this one. Recreation Commission did as well. And surprisingly, the Trails Committee also is voting unanimously to support Article 3. Any other town boards or committees? Any debate? Seeing none, let's proceed to a vote. All those in favor of the allocation of $15,000 from the Open Space and Recreation Fund for trails work, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Sharmley in the cafeteria?
Ayes have it.
Was that unanimous?
Yes.
And it's unanimous here, so the motion carries, and I so declare. Motion 4.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move motion 4 of Article 22 as written in the motion's handout.
Thank you. Is there a second? Motion's been made and seconded.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So this is where the CPC admin funds came in, both a request by CPC and CONSCOM for the creation of the 2020 Open Space and Recreation Plan. The reason that we're using administrative funds as opposed to the open space funds is because there's this clause in CPA that's the no supplant clause, which basically states that you cannot use CPA funds to fund something that would originally be or should be funded by the town general fund or general budget. So town council had a conversation with the Department of Revenue, and the point was made that since the CPC could actually use this as a guiding document for distributing funds in the future, that it could actually be used from our admin funds. So that's why we decided to use the admin funds this year. So the 20,000 is actually high. The number I think originally in the application was 16,000 and change, but we whittled it down to 9,000. So that's that explanation from earlier. So it's the CPC admin funds, and the clawback date would be 2021 because we would hope that the 2020 plan would be done by then.
Thank you. So on motion 4, Selectmen unanimously in favor. Planning Board also unanimously 6-0. Historical Commission voted to support unanimously. RecCom also voted to support. CONSCOM supports, and the Trails Committee voted unanimously to support motion 4. Any other boards or committees? No. Mr. Levitan at microphone 5.
Mark Levitan, 105 Wolf Rock Road. Just a question. Last night it was mentioned that this OS&R plan might be incorporated into the master plan. Would we need this money in that case?
So the plan still needs to be developed and written. I don't think the goal of the master plan would be to write this plan in addition to doing that. So I think it's to incorporate what's collected in this plan and use that as guidance, I would assume. Yep, yeah.
Did you have a follow-up?
If I may. It is my understanding that creation of this type of plan can be part of a master plan project. And of course, the deadline is potentially different, but I think that should be investigated, and perhaps this could be tossed back into the pot.
Thank you. And microphone 2.
Around East Street, I remember the chair.
Yeah, please either lift the microphone or bend over a little bit more. Thank you.
Randy Brown, East Street, there you go. I remember Jan Corneal, the chair of the Master Planning Committee, started to show how the housing production plan and the open space and recreation plan would be melded together in some way and would have to comply with or be traded off against each other. If we're going to go ahead and get a jump start on the open space and recreation plan, why not get a jump start on the housing production plan, which would also be part of a subset of the master plan?
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, let's proceed to a vote. This is for $9,000 to support the creation of the Open Space and Recreation Plan taken from the CPC admin funds bucket. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? And in the cafeteria?
Ayes have it.
Okay, the motion carries by a majority, and I so declare. Now, we are not going to have a motion under motion 5, despite what was printed in your motion handbook. I will explain what's happening, and then I'll give Mr. Ascolillo a minute to explain why it's happening. So on the way the CPC, or CPA, excuse me, Community Preservation Act works is that the Community Preservation Committee makes a recommendation to the town, and the town votes up or down. You don't have the opportunity to amend it. It was anticipated that the CPC, the Community Preservation Committee, would be making a recommendation, and that was why motion 5 was printed in your motion handout. But the CPC voted this evening not to make a recommendation under motion 5, so there's nothing for you to act on. But Mr. Ascolillo, could you explain the circumstances that led us to this?
Certainly. So the $300,000 was an estimate by the Conservation Commission based on some previous work that they had done. It went out to bid, and the bids came back significantly higher. So one of the things that is required in CPA is that CPA funds be used last, and we have not identified that gap. So there are a number of revenue streams that we're going to try to get money from. There's the state fund that I think is actually earmarked for dam repair, but we don't have clearance from the state yet on that, so ideally that will come in. But also, too, we should have better understanding as time goes on, ultimately, over the next year, if we will get those funds. If not, then I'm sure you guys will probably see this next year for the full amount, or if there's some sort of failure or emergency, then we might have a special town meeting. But ultimately, CPA responsibly can't expend funds without knowing that the project will be completed, and the $300,000 wouldn't get us there, so it was withdrawn.
Thank you. Okay, and with that, we can move on to Article 23, the Carlisle zoning bylaw to amend Section 5.12, the residential open space community portion of the zoning bylaw. Mr. Gim? Who's going to make this one? Mr. Friedman, are you making the motion? Okay.
I move Article 23 as printed in the motion booklet.
Is there a second? Okay, I recognize Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm David Friedman, 301 Hutchins Road, here to present an amendment to the Residential Open Space Community, or ROSC, bylaw I presented and which you resoundingly approved at a special town meeting in October 2017. The reason for the proposed amendment for a bylaw less than 2 years old is related to a decision made by the town approximately 20 years ago when the town of Carlisle reserved water rights on the O'Rourke land when the land was sold to U.S. Fish and Wildlife to become part of the Great Meadows National Wildlife Refuge abutting the Greeno land to the north and the Concord River to the east. We still retain these water rights in the area shown here in yellow. The water rights were reserved as a potential future public water supply for the town of Carlisle. A narrow easement in the O'Rourke land was also retained, which would allow for piping to Maple Street if the town ever decided to exercise its right and develop a public water supply. As you can see where the red X is, this would get the piping to a spot on Maple Street not quite a quarter mile from Bedford Road, the main east-west route through town. Thanks to the ROSC bylaw, the town stands to receive 32 acres of open space as part of the ongoing permitting process for the Woodward Village ROSC along Bedford Road. The open space, shown in light orange on the map, is adjacent to the town's reserved water rights area in Great Meadows to the northeast. Oops. Okay, good. The bylaw amendment being proposed tonight is to allow the placement of piping for a possible future public water supply through this open space parcel to a spot on Maple Street marked with a blue X on the map, about 1,000 feet closer to Bedford Road than piping through the easement I just showed you that leads to the red X. Again, this is hypothetical, but if we as a town do at some point want to access this water source, the potential savings from having to run piping down almost 1,000 feet of Maple Street might be on the order of $50,000 or more, not to mention the potential disruption to residents along the route of the piping. Even though the piping, if we ever do develop a public water supply in the reserved water rights area, would be buried and would have little or no impact on the open space, since any conveyance of preserved open space to the town requires use restrictions that must be approved by the state, we need to approve specific language in the bylaw that will require any conveyance documents to allow for underground piping for a possible future water supply. Remember, this is all hypothetical. There are no current plans to develop a public water supply. We're just being prudent, just as those who reserved the town's water rights here showed foresight 20 years ago. The first part of the proposed amendment, the deletions and new text shown in red, is just to allow piping for a possible public water supply for the town through the open space required in an ROSC development. The bylaw already allows a water supply and piping in the open space for the development itself. The new language also allows piping and related infrastructure for a public water supply for the town located on another lot or lots and to serve the town more generally and not just the development. The second part of the proposed amendment, the new text shown in red, references the section I just showed you, noting that even though this is open space to be kept in an open and natural state, piping in the open space for a public water supply for the town is also okay. It also specifies in the final few lines that the conveyance documents for the open space must explicitly authorize said utilities and infrastructure in the open space. The third part of the proposed amendment, the deletion and new text shown in red, is unrelated to the public water supply. It has to do with notice that the planning board is required to give upon receipt of any ROSC application to the affordable housing entity in town and the Council on Aging to alert them to the opportunity to provide input during the hearing related to affordability and senior-friendly modifications to units within the proposed development. Since a ROSC hearing is a public hearing, these local boards and any others and any citizen in town would have the opportunity to provide input. The purpose of the original language here was just to make this opportunity to provide input explicit. So essentially, this is a housekeeping amendment, changing the housing entity being informed from the Housing Authority to the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust. Even if town meeting doesn't vote later this evening, or sadly, perhaps tomorrow evening, to agree to the dissolution of the Housing Authority, this amendment still provides notice where it should be provided to the housing entity in town that has access to the funding that would be needed to actually effectuate any affordability restrictions on a unit or units in a ROSC, namely the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust. We spend a lot of time talking about planning versus being reactive or missing opportunities. This bylaw amendment is forward-looking in that it sets in place provisions that will save the town money in the future if and when we find that we need or want to create access to a public water supply for the town. As a zoning bylaw amendment, this requires a 2/3 vote, so please vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you. The recommendations on this planning board voted unanimously 6-0, and you, as noted before, you do have their report in writing. The selectmen also voted unanimously to support Article 23, and the Conservation Commission voted in support. Any other boards or committees weigh in on this one? Okay, the floor is open for debate. Mr. Hedden?
So the purpose of this amendment is to allow for a possible future water supply. Will Carlisle need an additional water supply in the foreseeable future?
Briefly?
We don't know. And this isn't to allow for the public water supply. We already have the rights for the land there that might provide us a public water supply. This is just to allow piping for it if and when we ever in the future decide to do it. But we are not at this time in any way taking a position on whether it's something we need or will need. We're just making it so if we ever do that, it'll be cheaper to access it.
Thank you. Microphone 2, please.
Randy Brown, East Street, just to clarify, in your last slide, you mentioned that you were going to change the name there it is, from the Housing Authority to the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust. The actual entity name is the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And also, we haven't yet voted on Article 32, which is to dissolve the Carlisle Housing Authority. So perhaps the language could be that it's you'd notify either the Housing Trust and/or the Housing Authority. That way, you can close on this one and close on the other one later when it's known if you really want to dissolve the Housing Authority.
Again, as
I've asked town council just to take a look on the name issue. Could you please approach the microphone if you have some useful information for us?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I already looked at a few times earlier this month. The actual language in the trust, I think it's the third bullet in, refers to the entity as the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So that change, I think, is appropriate, but town council can certainly confirm that.
I actually have a copy of the Declaration of Trust, and the heading is Declaration of Trust, Town of Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust. So it is referred as a Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust Fund, but the document itself in the title just says Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust.
Okay. Town council agrees with Mr. Friedman. Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. This is a 2/3 vote. Just to, let's just do this with a voice vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? And in the cafeteria?
Ayes have it.
Okay, that does pass by 2/3, and I so declare the motion carries. We're now on to, it's been a busy night for zoning. Article 24, an amendment to the zoning bylaws to the revisions to the solar district. Who wants to make the motion? Is Mr. Gambino or one of you? Mr. Gambino, please.
I make a motion that town meeting adopt Article 24 as printed in the town warrant.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Before we start on this, Articles 24, 25, and 26 are all interrelated, having to do with solar project at the school. Because they are interrelated, in order for the meeting to make an informed vote, even on the first article, number 24, it was my judgment that the meeting ought to hear an overview of all three articles at the beginning. And so I've determined that the presenters on this can have up to 16 minutes. I don't think they will take that long to give a complete overview of the three. And then we'll vote on the first, we'll have the debate, vote on the first one, then we'll have the motion on the second and on the third, and they may need to say something for another minute or so before each of those. But net, we'll have less time on presentation, and I hope you'll be better informed. So with that, I recognize Mr. Zimmerman.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Eric Zimmerman of Sunset Road, and my handsome co-presenter here is Jonathan DeCock of Oak Knoll Road. I suspect that you'll be glad to know that Jonathan and I are not here to ask you for money tonight. We are here to share two really cool solar projects with you, one at the transfer station and one at the school. In combination, these projects will create two primary benefits. First, we expect them to generate about $1.3 million in income for the town, and at the same time, they'll produce enough electricity to power every municipal building in the town, including the school. Let's talk about the money first. For over a year now, volunteers from the Energy Task Force and the Solar Working Group have run a process in coordination with a variety of town boards. We looked at the possibility of building and owning these installations ourselves, and we also ran a competitive bidding process for companies that would build, own, and operate the solar canopies on our behalf. In the end, the latter option turned out to be much more profitable for the town. This was the same conclusion drawn by a number of other towns in our region, including Wayland and Ashland. With your approval, our partner Amoresco will build and own the solar canopies, which means there's zero capital investment for the town. And through a ground lease contract, Amoresco will pay us an estimated $65,000 per year, which will add up to $1.3 million over the term of the agreement, but only if we act quickly. That's because a significant portion of these payments come from an incentive program offered by the state of Massachusetts. It's called the SMART program, and it's designed to get towns to develop solar resources quickly. The program is divided into blocks, with the highest payments going to the towns that act first. Block 1 is already full, and based on our timing, we expect to fall into blocks 3 or 4. But if we want this money, we need to act now. By this time next year, the opportunity will likely be gone. Now let's talk about the climate for a moment. Flooding in Scituate, drought in Iowa, wildfires in California. We're seeing the early impacts of climate change unfold right before our eyes. In Carlisle, our electricity use is part of the problem. Every year, our municipal buildings use 1.2 gigawatt hours of electricity. In turn, they create almost 2 million pounds of CO2. That's like bringing 5 rail cars of coal or 11 tanker trucks full of gasoline to the school parking lot and lighting them on fire every single year. But it doesn't have to be this way. I'm sorry. If we approve these two projects, we'll produce enough clean, renewable energy to power every municipal building in town, and then some, rendering our buildings net zero on an electricity basis. So let's take a look, and let's start at the transfer station. Here's a bird's eye view from Lowell Street, and you'll notice the swap shed and recycling bins in the back and undercover, so you may recycle in total comfort. Here's a ground level view as you enter the transfer station. It's where the paper recycling bins will be located. And here's the ground level view you'll see as you pull up to deposit trash and cardboard. Now, let's take a quick look at the school project. Here's a bird's eye view from above the auditorium that we're in now, looking out towards Church Street. The array on the left will shelter the school buses as they arrive. Here's a ground level view of the same array. It's what I hope you'll see when you leave town meeting next year. And here's the view from the parking level, where your car will be waiting for you free of snow when you visit the school on a snowy night next winter. And lastly, as a point of reference, here's an actual project completed by our partner Amoresco in the town of Wayland. So, how do we make this happen? For that, I'll turn things over to my partner, Jonathan.
So, Jonathan DeCock, 130 Oak Knoll Road. I'm going to walk you through the actions we need to take today in order to make this project happen. We have 3 warrant articles. Number 24, to create the legal framework to enable this project by amending the Solar Overlay District bylaw. Number 25, to authorize town boards and committees to enter into agreements on the town's behalf. And number 26, to repave the school parking lot as part of the project to install canopies over it. We'll be discussing the first 2, taking votes on them, and then if they pass, discussing the third. First, we need to expand the solar overlay district we created a few years ago at the transfer station to also include the school grounds. The exact bylaw change is shown in the addition of the underlined words in your handout and can be visualized on this map by the area outlined in blue. This area includes the school grounds proper, but excludes Spalding Field, the tennis courts, and the trees on the hill. To orient you, the auditorium we are sitting in is about in the center of the map, with the parking lot and Church Street above it, and Spalding Field to your right in green. Second, we need to amend the bylaw to allow canopies, but only in the overlay district, and then restrict the height of those canopies. Large vehicles like fire trucks require a good amount of clearance, so the canopies need to be fairly high. However, we want to manage it, so we limit them to no more than 25 feet at their highest point. Regular ground mount installations remain restricted to 12 feet. Third, Town Council noted that the properties are officially split into multiple parcels and that the current bylaw requires 40-foot setbacks from all lot lines. This map shows an example of the problem at the transfer station. There is a lot line that runs right through the middle of it. If we didn't fix this, we'd have to stay 40 foot away from that arbitrary line. There is a similar problem at the school with arbitrary lot lines running right through the middle of school buildings. In order to correct for this, Town Council recommends we add wording which specifies that if you own both sides of a lot line, then the 40-foot setback does not apply. They recommend we make this change in 2 places in the bylaw to address all ground-mounted solar installations. The exact additional wording is shown underlined in your handout. In summary, this bylaw amendment establishes the legal framework for us to consider this project. As you can see, it is relatively simple changes which add the school property to the overlay district, allow for canopies with height restrictions, and clarify the lot lines. Article 25 is about us, all of us, as the legislative body, authorizing specific town boards and committees to use town lands and enter into agreements on the town's behalf to bring about this project. We will enable the Board of Selectmen to have decision-making authority over the full project, with the school committee handling aspects specific to the school and the Board of Assessors handling the tax-related items. There are 4 parts to it: a lease agreement to allow the use of town land, taxes on the canopies to be paid to the town, a municipal net metering agreement for the town-owned buildings, and an easement to connect the solar systems to the grid. Before we break and turn the floor back over to the moderator, we've had some frequently asked questions which we'd like to address. The snow will stay on top of the canopies. They are designed to building code standards and can handle the weight and wind loads and are high enough for plows to get under them to remove any drifting snow. The shallow Y shape prevents snow and ice from sliding off to hurt anyone or damage anything. Instead, it will melt and drip down around the panels. Which also answers the question about rain. The small gaps between the panels allow rain to drip through, so you will still get wet if you're standing underneath them. We won't lose any parking because the canopies are supported from the center between the parking lines, although some spaces will get a little bit shorter. The panels Amoresco plans to install are made by the eco-friendly company SunPower. They have been certified by many groups, including Cradle to Cradle, and regularly win awards and are ranked at the top for sustainable and environmentally friendly manufacturing. Furthermore, the SunPower E435 panels, which Amoresco plans to use, contain no heavy metals, hazardous chemicals, or other toxins. They are so clean, they could be disposed of as regular household waste, unlike the phone in your pocket, which is hazardous waste. That said, the panels have also won awards for the ease of recycling, and so we expect that they will be recycled when the time comes. Most of us have heard that it is better to own than lease, so why is the town leasing rather than buying? The answer is that we're a town government, and as such, we can't take advantage of the 30% tax credit offered by the federal government. On top of that, Amoresco builds and runs many of these solar arrays. They will be a lot more efficient at it than we would. And finally, if we bought it, we'd be here asking you for a few $1 million to start a venture rather than offering you over $1 million in lease payments. We haven't yet gotten to the point of doing a final design. That comes next with Amoresco starting site plan review with the planning board. In those discussions, we'll be figuring out details like screening, as required by the bylaw, landscaping, exact location, colors, and the like. The Conservation Commission will also be involved since part of the transfer station is in a wetland buffer zone and Amoresco will want to cut some trees down to let the sunlight through. If you would like to help ensure that this project gets built in a way that reflects Carlisle's character and commitment to the environment, we encourage you to come to those meetings and provide your input. These design meetings are the next step. They are expected to take about 2 to 3 months. Once agreement is reached, we expect all boards will have signed off by around midsummer. Construction would begin in late summer and continue into the fall, complete by the end of the year. There will be some construction during school next fall, but we expect any disruption to be relatively minor and easily managed. In summary, we've got a great opportunity for the town here, and we'd like your support. Okay, it's going to be time for us to act. As you weigh your decision on how to vote, keep in mind we're offering the town $1.3 million in revenue, the ability to take a positive step to help address climate change, and some very nice covered parking at the school. Mr. Moderator?
Thank you very much. I appreciate your relative brevity in covering 3 articles. So, the recommendations on this one, Planning Board voting in favor unanimously 6-0, Selectmen also unanimous, School Committee unanimously, Conservation Commission voted to support, as did the Energy Task Force. All right, any other boards or committees weigh in? None. Okay, we're open for discussion.
Wayne, Finance Committee.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Finance Committee voted to support this 5-0.
Finance Committee is also supporting. Yes, thank you. Okay, sir, at microphone 5.
Andy Ostrom, 68 Ledgeways. We're in one of the 2 lots that adjoins the transfer station there, so this is right in my backyard. I have a couple of comments and a couple of questions. First, we were told earlier that about $60,000 to $100,000 a year of revenue for a marijuana retail establishment was insignificant, but you're trying to sell us on a 20-year lifespan of $50-something thousand a year. So I find the economic argument pretty non-compelling, especially since the bulk of it comes from tax revenues that a rich town like us will be then taking from other either federal or state coffers that could be used or for taxes that could be lowered. So realistically, there's no economic case for this without the tax benefits. You said so pretty much in your presentation. Second of all, I think that the elements of the weather play a positive role at the transfer station. The rain and the snow and the clearing of it tends to keep the place cleaner. It helps to protect against potential rodent issues and potential smell issues. I wonder what's going to happen, and this is a question for you, what's going to happen underneath those canopies over 20 years as the crud builds up and doesn't get washed away. And as the birds, there are owls that live in the woods between my house and the transfer station. I hear them every night. I'm sure they're out there hunting the rodents. What's the plan going to be to address all those kinds of issues? And then the last question is, has Amoresco, have they ever built a facility over a transfer station? I wonder what's going to happen when, not if, but when a truck runs into one of those pillars and knocks down a panel, and how that gets dealt with.
Could you please address those?
Let's see. So I guess on the question of what's going to happen underneath the transfer station, I believe all the equipment can still run underneath there, so I don't expect that there will be crud that builds up. You know, they're going to be 15 feet off the ground, so all of Gary Davis's equipment will be able to work under there. In fact, I would expect it would, you know, look pretty much the same as it is now, and the rain does fall through it. So I think it will wash away just as well as it does now, which I think personally is a bit of a problem when there's a river running through the transfer station, but over the other questions?
So at least the other two, and I'll invite Mr. Ostrom back if we miss any, were one, any impact on vermin and so forth, and then and what was the oh, and yes, and then potential damage if a truck happens to hit one of the pillars.
So we do have representatives from Amoresco here. We could have them speak if we wanted. But I know
not without a motion from you. So if you have the answer, please give it.
So what happens if a truck hits it is handled by the lease agreement. Depends on the nature, but I believe that's handled under the liability of whoever is driving the truck. Bob, do you know?
Please identify yourself.
Bob Clark, Energy Task Force and the Solar Working Group. Yeah, Amoresco would have liability. They'll have liability insurance, and they'll also have liability if they cause any damage to the equipment. If we cause damage, I mean, obviously, we would have to be responsible for that. To answer the other question about what other towns have done this, the city of Newton has done this at their transfer stations, and pretty significant systems that I've seen and talked to them, and they seem to enjoy it. And I also feel Newton has some pretty similar values as Carlisle in terms of aesthetics and concerns like that.
So just if we can be very precise on the liability question. So if the truck that happens to hit the pillar is a town of Carlisle truck, then that presumably is on liability on the town, which would be covered by the town's insurance policy.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Luby.
Good evening, Jay Luby, 84 Woodbine Road. Two very quick questions. Would the swap shed be replaced before you built the canopy? And secondly, for the canopy itself, who would be responsible for the maintenance to make sure we don't have insect nests, et cetera, underneath?
Please answer.
So no, the shed would not be replaced. It could be replaced at any time afterwards, so there's really nothing stopping that. Amoresco, I believe, is responsible for all maintenance, and so I believe if there were problems, it would be Amoresco's responsibility to take care of them.
Thank you. Let's go to microphone 2. Mr. Kissinger.
Drew Kissinger, 481 Curve Street.
I have a couple specific questions. I've asked you guys this before at a selectman meeting and didn't really get a great answer. I think the people in the town would be pretty interested in the answers to these questions. What is the monthly revenue that Amoresco will clear from this solar installation at market rate for the power? That's question one. And question, well, you know, I want to make a general comment too. I feel like we're doing a disservice to the town when we allow people to get up in front of these meetings and give really slick marketing presentations without actually, some people do a really nice job, like David Friedman gets up and tells us the pros and cons of everything and is really open. Some people get up and give us a really slick presentation that leaves out a lot of real key factors. And I think it's really doing the town a disservice, and I'd like us to consider as a town to give some guidance to people and disallow this kind of thing. Just tell us how much Amoresco is going to make every year on the amount of power.
Could you address that one?
I do not know the answer.
Why not?
Okay, we're not going to have a back and forth. At microphone 4, please. Could we have microphone 4 up, please? Thank you.
Jeremy Burley, 47 Hart Farm Road. I've got 3 questions. The first one, the projects in Article 24 and 25, if I understand correctly, are going to require $250,000 in resurfacing that's being voted on in Article 26?
No, that's not required. That's why it's last.
Understood. And at the Tier 3 and 4 pricing that was listed on the state document, you presented roughly $50,000 to $60,000 a year, so the $250,000 might take 4 or 5 years to break even on a resurfacing investment?
And ask your next question then, please.
And then the last question is, the town obligated to purchase power as part of the arrangement, and is can you give us a sense of the pricing that might be if we are?
Okay, so let's do the pricing one first, and then we'll come back and do the connection with the resurfacing project.
What was the question on the pricing? I'm sorry.
I believe the question was, is the town obligated to purchase
yes.
electricity, and if so, at what price?
Yes, so the town does need to enter into a net metering agreement with Amoresco, and what that means is they produce credits on a dollar-for-dollar basis for the amount of electricity that we use. The reason that we enter the net metering agreement is because the state incentives are better if they have an agreement with the town. And so that effectively ends up translating back to the amount of lease money that they can pay us. So we will not pay a penny more for the electricity that we are using. We will pay the exact same amount, but we do end up paying it to Amoresco directly rather than to Eversource directly.
Okay, thank you. And then, so the question about the connection with the school parking lot resurfacing project. So Article 26 is asking to borrow $250,000 to resurface the parking lot at the school. And I believe the question is, the first question, which you already answered, was, does the solar project necessitate the resurfacing? So if you could please explain the connection between these two.
If you don't mind, I have an entire presentation on that. Can we do that when we get to Article 26?
So let me try a brief answer. I think I know what you're getting at. So if I understand correctly, the solar project, to the extent that the parking lot will be torn up in order to do the installation, Amoresco would go ahead and do the normal patching on that. Correct?
That's correct, yes. Amoresco is required to patch.
And the problem is that the parking lot is, as you'll hear in more detail, is at the end of its useful life, and the level of patching that Amoresco would do to bring it back to its current state would not last terribly long. Therefore, the Article 26 will only be moved if we, Article 26 would pay to get the parking lot to where it needs to be over the long term. Is that a fair? Okay. I do think it's important that people understand the connection amongst all of these projects.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. At microphone 5, please.
Sam Verge, 29 Indian Hill. How long is the lease agreement for?
20 years.
20 years. And then as far as maintenance goes, do you have any references on how fast they get out to fix things? I have to lease signage. I'm an auto dealer. I lease signage all the time, and it takes forever to get them out to fix the signs. So if we do have an issue, did you call other towns to see how long it takes them to get out?
So I can tell you this, we did
They'll tell you
call up
next
their
day, by the way,
references.
but that doesn't
We did call up their references from the many places and towns around here, and they got very glowing reviews on everything that Amoresco has done with them. So I can't give you a number of hours that it takes them to come out and fix a fixture.
I just didn't
but-
know if somebody was like, oh yeah, they came a week later or
Yeah.
the next day. I mean, you know, because that can happen.
Okay, thank you. At microphone 1?
Yes, thank you. Mike Hanauer at 200 Long Ridge Road. I'm especially wondering about the transfer station. You go over there on a Saturday these days, and it's often a free-for-all. It seems to me that at some point, the transfer station is going to need major reconfiguration in some way. And two thoughts related to that. Number one, is there sufficient flexibility with this project to do that? And number two, related, might it make sense to forego doing the transfer station at all in order to win that flexibility and to see how the project works out at the school?
Okay. That's not really a factual question, so we'll just leave it out there for consideration, and we'll give you a chance to respond to that and anything else before we vote. Thank you, Mr. Hanna. Did you have any further comments?
That's it. I was looking for an answer, though. Was it considered how the transfer station could be reconfigured after this is done?
Okay, we'll give a quick yes or no on that. Was that part of the consideration?
We did consider that, and that's one of the reasons why it's running a ring around the outside edge, because that gives us kind of maximum flexibility to do whatever we need to in the future.
And how about delaying the transfer station altogether until we see how the school? I hear the rush to get these state funds, but I'm worried it might make sense to do one project, see how it goes, what we learn, and then do the next one.
We did not consider that because this year is the last year for like the 30% incentive and whatnot, and the block numbers are going down quickly. And so I think if we were to delay either one, it would become financially non-viable quickly.
Okay, thank you. I'll recognize the gentleman behind you at microphone 1.
Steve Tropoli, Westward Road. Mine is just a comment. I thank you guys for coming up with revenue for the town. And it makes me glad to have something that we can say we're doing something to address climate change in town, and thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Kissinger, I'm going to recognize other people who haven't yet had a chance
I have
to speak.
a point of information.
I'm sorry?
Point of information?
No. You may have a point of procedure around how we're doing things, but if it's information about the article, yes, back in line. Is that Mr. Belletz back there?
Ken Belletz, 112 Johnson Road. I have a question regarding erosion at the transfer station. You indicated that rain's going to fall between the panels. Well, those panels will collect a fair amount of water that the rain can't get through, and then it's going to run off to the sides or down. And it seems like there might be some erosion that would occur on that unpaved surface. So whose liability will it be to repair the surface that gets eroded?
There's actually not likely to be any erosion. Each panel is about 5 foot by 3 foot, and the rain drips around the panels. It doesn't run to the edge of the entire array. So I
Right.
think it would be
I hear
approximately
you.
the same as it is today.
And then the space between the panels is how much?
Is, I believe, around 3/8 of an inch.
Right, so you've got 3 feet of panel, 1/8 inch of space. So the rain that would have fallen over 3 feet is now coming down on a 1/8 inch gap. So I think we should be prepared for erosion and to mitigate.
Could you please clarify, are that you're asking about at the transfer station?
At the transfer station,
and-
I think one of the costs.
And are the panels at the transfer station all located on paved or some of them on unpaved areas?
I think they're almost all paved, but I can't guarantee that there wouldn't be some that would not be over some unpaved area. That would be part of the site plan review process to figure that out.
So we have both site plan review, and I believe you mentioned that CONSCOM has at least some jurisdiction at the transfer station.
Correct.
Okay. Also at microphone 2.
Julia Kropf, Ice Pond Road. The motion state that it be a maximum length of 20 years. Who takes responsibility for moving at the end of 20 years if we decide to do that? Also, the past years have shown that companies are not necessarily immortal. So I'd recommend the town would put some of this money, the windfall, into escrow to deal with the costs of taking away the waste if it should be needed. I'd also point out that solar panels are greatly improving in their efficiency. So we are giving up control of our transfer station parking lot and our school parking lot for 20 years. And that's a significant thing to think about.
So if you could just address briefly the question of what happens after 20 years.
So that's a great question. So Amoresco is required to have a bond that will take care of decommissioning it. So whether they go out of business or 20 years happens, they're required to come in and completely decommission it and put it back to the state it was in before they got here. Yeah, it's in the bylaw.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Erickson, please.
David Erickson, 237 Fisk Street. So we installed solar in 2012 and again in 2014. 2012, we were getting SREC 1. 2014, we're getting SREC 2, which is not quite as good as SREC 1. Now we have this new system, which is not nearly as good as either SREC 1 or SREC 2. The SRECs, in fact, it was brought up that we're paying for subsidies of solar through our taxes. That's not actually true. The SRECs are, we are paying, some people are paying through their electric bill, I suppose, just as we're also paying for subsidies for fossil fuels. I think the subsidies for solar are quite a bit less, but they're not. The 30% tax credit is clearly a tax credit, but the SRECs are not. They're a mandate that utilities have to have a certain amount of renewable, and so they're buying credits, solar renewable energy credits. They were. I mean, this new program, I'm not sure exactly how it does work. In regards to how these facilities look and whether they accumulate trash and such, there's a large canopy at REI in Framingham. I expect a number of people have seen it. Koenig's Market on Martha's Vineyard has had canopies similar to these for probably 10 years. In general, I think it's an advantage because, yes, the rain does drip around the edge, but you get quite a bit of sheltering when you're under the panels. Our second, when we installed solar panels in 2014, that was a ground mount array. And again, we do have space between the panels, but you do get quite a bit of sheltering underneath the panels. So I think this will probably be a net benefit for the parking lots.
Thank you. I'll recognize Mr. Fink at microphone 1.
Thank you. Bill Fink, Daniels Lane. First off, thank you for bringing a revenue-generating opportunity to the town as well as an environmentally friendly one. So I do appreciate that. And I'm leveraging the fact that we're talking about kind of all three of these articles at the same time. The logistics for the school, you mentioned to be minimal construction during the school year, but we're also talking about tearing up the parking lot. So those don't go together. I'm trying to figure out how are we, one question could be, is the benefit of doing this now, of being able to get the advantage of that tax credit now for this vendor, does that still allow us to do this project, say, a year from this summer, when the school isn't in use?
Could you please answer that?
No, I don't think so. I think we would end up falling into, like Block 8 and whatnot, so I think it would become financially non-viable to put it off for a year. I think also, based on the way time is lining up, the majority of the project tearing up the parking lot would be done before school starts.
This summer, you mean?
This summer. Okay. But we can talk about that more in a second. I've got a whole presentation on it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ostrom, I'm going to apply the Drew Kissinger rule to
Sure.
you and recognize Mr. Hedden, who is standing behind you, since he hasn't yet had an opportunity to speak on this one.
Okay. You mentioned that there are plans for decommissioning or removing the solar panels after a 20-year lease expires. What if after 20 years we decide to keep them? Is there a possibility to renew it or buy them?
Yes, there is. We can do either of those. The lease supports either of those possibilities at the end of the 20 years. So we could renegotiate the lease for more time, or we could buy the panels off them and essentially get the electricity for free.
Okay, thank you. Have I been ignoring you back at microphone 3 there? I'm sorry about that. My mistake. I recognize you, though I can barely see you. It's my eyesight.
Thank you. Yeah, this is Jin Su. I'm at 165 Hutchins Road, and I think it's very sad to sit in our town meeting listening to those commercial pitches. And also, I was in a hearing several weeks ago. I asked some questions, and yesterday I got an email from Jonathan, and I didn't get any really answer there. So today, in this presentation, I hear the manufacturing process of these solar panels doesn't produce any toxic materials. And also, the solar panel doesn't contain any toxic material. This is just beyond ridiculous. How can you make those solar panels without toxic materials? You use heavy metals, strong acid, strong base. During the manufacturing process, you use very high temperature, very high pressure. Okay, I asked where the solar panels were made by that company, and I got an email from Jonathan saying it's in Malaysia somewhere. Okay, I wanted the address of that manufacturing site. Years ago, those solar panels were made all in China and India. I can tell you the waste released from those manufacturing sites, they're released in the soil. Thousands and thousands of acres of land cannot grow anything in 50 years, 50. And how do we dispose it? I just heard we can dispose like a general household trash. Okay, we are all educated. This is a very well-educated town. You just cannot tell us things like this. And also, over the past 25 years, over 95% of solar companies already bankrupted. Can I guess this solar company, I forgot the name, Amerisco? How long are they going to survive? And also another problem is the leaching problem. I asked in that hearing several weeks ago. I was told it's like your cell phone. You can sleep with it. I just want to ask,
have
if you
about
put
15
your cell
seconds
phone
left, sir.
in the weather, exposed to the sun, in the rain, do you still sleep with your cell phone? And also,
So you're at 3
I
minutes,
wait
sir.
for a long time, and,
could you please wrap up, sir? You're at 3 minutes.
And also, we all know how ugly those solar panels are and how beautiful Carlisle is. Can you imagine when you walk out, just right now, you see those solar panels, those very, very ugly
Sir,
things right in your face?
Sir, thank you. You're at 3 minutes. Thank you for your comments. We have the next person at microphone 3. Thank you.
Sure. My name is George Abel. I'm from 257 Lowell Street, and I know a little bit about chemistry. I'm president-elect of the American Association of Clinical Chemistry's Academy. I don't know much about solar panels, so I looked into it a little bit. And I found in some scientific papers that other than one type, which is constructed of the so-called amorphous silicon, which is not the crystalline silicon, all others contain toxic materials. So could we get a full list of the components, chemical components of these solar panels? I think it would be important, and what might leak out in 20 years in the Carlisle weather conditions. This would be, I think, important. Is anybody going to sign this as absolutely lead-free, cadmium-free, telluride-free, antimony-free, or free of any of the plastic-related materials like BPA, PBD, or others? What kind of paste is used to sticking together, to glue together the silicon wafers? We haven't heard anything about that. We only got in the response that the cells themselves don't contain lead. How about the soldering materials that used to stitch together the copper materials? I have another question which is kind of different from this. I wonder if anybody of the proponents in our town or anybody who is in the decision-making panels have any kind of financial interest in Ameresco. Is there a disclaimer that none of the people or family members own any stocks or in any way work with Ameresco? I think we need that. And also, who will sign on the behalf of the town to guarantee that there is no leakage and absolutely zero emission from these into the town water?
Okay, thank you. We have a couple of questions there. A simple yes or no on the first one is a list of the materials that go in the solar panels. Is that available? Could it be made available?
Not right this moment.
No,
I
I'm
believe
not
I
asking
answered-
right this moment, but you did make reference in your presentation. You said there was a certified process, and
Yes, there is. So I
so
believe
that is available, and
it is.
all right, good. And then as to the question of who would be signing this on behalf of the town, this would be executed by the Board of Selectmen, is that correct?
The Board of Selectmen and the school committee.
And the school committee. And then the further question that was asked, and sir, you're asking about when you're asking who may have stock holdings in Ameresco, which people are you asking that of?
Those who proposed, those who presented, and all of our selectmen and planning board members. And if you want, I can probably expand the list, but I don't exactly know who are the exact proponents or who brought this to the table. They should be absolutely free of any conflict of interest.
Do we have that information?
Is there a state ethics law?
Actually, that is there is state ethics law. I don't know what the application is to this particular situation, but leaving that aside, no debate. We don't have that information. Is that correct? Yeah, let me.
No, I have no financial interest in this whatsoever.
And
I don't have a financial interest in this at all, just lots of volunteer time in.
and Mr.
Say to
Clark?
Bob Clark, I have no interest. And I also want to say that in terms of there was a whole process here, this started, we probably had 6 or 7 meetings with the Board of Selectmen before we solicited bids. We solicited a public request for proposal, following all the processes that you would follow for that. We formed a committee of 4 or 5 people to evaluate the proposals. We've got 3 valid proposals. We vetted those by the Board of Selectmen, who had to sign off on the selection and asked a lot of questions. They also reduced, we originally had ground mount systems as well, but the Board of Selectmen did not approve. I think it's been a very above board and public process, and that's all.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Mr. Ansara at microphone 4, please.
Michael Ansara, 225 Lowell Street. Our property comes quite close to the DPW, so we could be considered abutters. And I want to explain why I'm so excited by this proposal and so grateful for you all for putting it together. I think we're losing sight of the moral imperative that we have. Climate change is a huge challenge. The fact that our president denies it does not make it any less so. We're a small town. You have come up with a creative way to move us towards a renewable, sustainable future. The fact that it produces income, the fact that it is practical and creative is to be commended. Even if it didn't, we should be doing it. Our children and our grandchildren's future demands that every single citizen, town, and entity in this country take seriously the challenges of climate change. You have done that, and as a near abutter, I applaud it, and we are excited. I would say one other thing. We have had solar panels on our roof for the last 8 or 9 years. We have had 0 problems. There has been no pollution. They have been maintenance-free, and they have been terrific. So we are enthusiastic and look forward to looking out of our back and seeing this array at the DPW. Thank you. And again, I want to say one other thing. We should be rewarding the volunteers that put in so much time and effort to do the due diligence and to come up with these proposals and not questioning their integrity. Thank you.
No applause, please. I am serious, okay? We do not do that. Now, Mr. Kissinger, I made you wait a long time. You can have your second shot.
Point of information, if it's 1.6 megawatts, is that what it is? 1.6 megawatts a year?
1.5.
That's $320,000 a year at just regular market rate, 20 cents a kilowatt hour. Amoresco or the town would make $320,000 a year, and that's not with any tax incentives or kickbacks or state programs. Point of information.
Thank you. Mr. Zog?
Bob Zog, 923 North Road. I just want to balance the discussion a little bit. There's been some sincere concerns expressed about the environmental impacts potentially of this renewable energy generation facility. And I think the point we're missing is that there is no way we know of to produce energy with 0 environmental impact. So yes, a renewable asset like this will have some environmental impact, no question. What we're neglecting is, what's the alternative? Coal? Oil? Gas? think about it for a minute. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe there was someone else waiting at microphone 3. Is that correct?
Yes.
Please.
The presentation.
Could you
looks
please
to me-
identify yourself?
Inji Able, 257 Lower Street.
Thank you.
Thank you for the committee to allow me to have a chance to talk. To me, the presentation sounds like an infomercial, so it looks like it's too good to be real. And if you say projecting income is $1.3 million, if anything happens, like soil is contaminated, nearby water, well water is contaminated, I can easily sue anybody who is responsible for this, $1.3 million. And that's the bottom line. So I want accountability in the contract. I want the contract to be added in terms of a full list of chemical materials present in the solar cells and solar panels, full disclosure of components and composition of all main and auxiliary materials. And second one is whether any of these materials, including but not limited to the byproducts of any materials used in the solar cells, are toxic, causing cancer, and in what manner they are toxic and may possibly cause cancer or other diseases. Third, the procedure on environmental monitoring of a leak that has happened, and what that may have happened, and what has been leaked, and the frequency of the tests, and the cost of such tests, and who is doing the test. And to my knowledge, there hasn't been a very good test because many type of chemicals, you can't just perform a simple test. And if there is any leak, and what is the plan B regarding the contamination of the soil and water nearby? So with that, I demand that all the well waters in the nearby transfer station in the neighborhoods, all the family waters, as well as near the school, are being tested prior to the construction of the solar panel project. And all the well waters should be tested every 3 months for possible contaminations. And to make sure that nothing like this will happen, we all know what happened to Wuben, and many children get cancer, and they suspect materials that causes cancer is one of the toxic chemicals. So whoever signed this contract, I fully demand that all these terms to be written into the contract so that the town or any committee in the town be accountable down the road, 30 years, 20 years from now.
Okay,
So
you're at
$1.3
3
million.
minutes. Please conclude. Thank you. At microphone 5, please.
Mark Levitan, Wolf Rock Road. I hadn't intended to speak about this. I'm fully in favor of it. Mr. Moderator, I find it very unfortunate that we are being blitzed with scare tactics about what is a very safe, in widespread use product throughout the world. And I really don't have expertise in the construction and manufacture of solar panels, but I do have expertise in cradle-to-cradle certification. And that is a global standard of human health impact analysis that is peer-reviewed and backed by science. You cannot get a cradle-to-cradle certification if there are human health impacts for normal use. So let's try to step it back a little bit and understand that we have a great opportunity here to lower our carbon footprint in a completely safe manner and to move this ahead.
Thank you. At microphone 1, please.
Jonathan Supnick, 284 Acton Street. I just wanted to add that there are hundreds of private solar installations all over town. There are solar panels on the roof of this building. So if solar panels were posing a danger to groundwater, adding a few more, not going to make a difference. That's all.
Thank you. Microphone 2.
Hello, I'm Rita Kapadia, 1006 East Street. I have just one question. Since you are locating these panels in the school, right where little children, even at 2 years of age, 3 years, 5 years, they are little. How do their bodies get affected with these solar panels? I'm sure they are toxic. The town of Woburn had a lot of leukemia cases. So have you guys looked into this on effect on small children? And why are we locating these in the schoolyard? We have a lot of land in Carlisle. Why not anywhere else?
Okay, we're just going to proceed. I'm going to take that as a rhetorical question that I believe has already been answered by other speakers. At microphone 4, please.
Thank you. Dan Abel, 257 Lowell Street. I'm also here voluntarily, so thank you. So who's willing to sign a disclaimer that nothing's going to contaminate our drinking water, because we didn't have an answer to that question. I'm not going to speculate on anything, but I'm asking who's willing to sign that contract.
That's another rhetorical question. We're not going to get an answer to that. Municipal officials are not required to sign disclaimers of that type on any contract. So,
Who is? Will someone else do it then?
we'll take microphone 5, please.
Andy Ostrom, 68 Ledgeways. My issue is not with safety or contamination from the panels themselves. I think that's kind of beating a dead horse. But my issue was with two things. One is the siting of these panels in places where they're going to be ugly, to be frank, versus people who are so concerned about environmental issues, give up some of the open space somewhere, put them out in the middle of a field where they're not going to bother anybody. Second point is, somebody said something about, well, at least we'll feel like we're doing something for the environment. Well, we don't do things because they feel good. We do them because they have a real positive impact. And I think that it's a little hypocritical in a town where you go outside and there's, gas guzzling vehicles, and we live in big houses that consume a lot of energy, a lot more than the average. So if this makes you feel good about you're doing something, okay, but the reality is that this town is still a net generator of carbon.
Okay, thank you. At microphone 1, please.
Hi, Abby Zimmerman, Sunset Road. Just a disclaimer, I am related to Eric Zimmerman. I just wanted to say two things. One thing in response to the gentleman who just spoke, that's actually not true. I have solar panels on my roof. I drive a plug-in car, as does my husband. Our house is net zero, and we have invested in this heavily because we care about it. And I'm really proud of the effort that these gentlemen have made, as well as many others. My daughter is proud. Her friends are proud. They are living proof that you can make a difference. So I just hope that people support this. So much time and energy has gone into it.
Microphone 2, please.
My name is Ralph Anderson, 433 Baldwin Road. About 25 years ago, I was Vice President for Engineering at BTU Engineering. We manufactured machinery for producing silicon-based solar cells. Although there were many chemicals involved in that, I never drank any, but I can say that the environmental controls were such that we did not release any pollutants into the air if you don't consider the gases of carbon dioxide. I think it's a very safe manufacturing process.
Thank you. Mr. Erickson.
David Erickson, 237 Fisk Street. There have been a lot of issues brought up. If we're really worried about contaminating our groundwater, we should ban internal combustion engines from Carlisle. I mean, we just had several motions about remediating problems with groundwater because of gas storage tanks. So questions about what's in the solar panels, do you ask the same questions about what's in your automobile windshield? It has wires in it. Who knows what's in that? If we're worried about our children on the parking area, well, they shouldn't be there. The cars are a far greater danger than the solar cells are going to be. I mean, in terms of aesthetics, We were looking at a project to put solar panels on the First Religious Society, on the church. And people were wondering what it would look like, so I tried taking some pictures of the church. Well, I couldn't get any pictures that weren't covered with electrical wires. I mean, you go out there and the electrical wires are really atrocious. Nobody's complaining about that. They wouldn't even have seen the solar panels on the church. I personally find solar installations to have a very pleasant aesthetic.
Thank you. Microphone 4, please.
Kathy McDonald, Knoll Farm Road. And two things. First, I'm very supportive of this, and I want to thank the folks that have done it. I want to say that the belief in the safety of our children, I know for many of the folks that are both on the panel and broadly in the town, is first and foremost on all of our minds, and we would never, and I'm confident that the work that was done in making recommendations on what would go into our town is very safe for our children in all sorts of ways. And secondly, I would like to call the question so that we can take a vote and put this thing forward and put the positivity and not the scare factors, but the reality of the information that's been presented and not just random things that are getting thrown out as pseudoscience. And so let's vote on the research that's been done and the people doing the work for the town to put forward reasonable proposals. Thank you. Can I make the motion for the?
Almost you could have, except with a call for the question, you have to say it at the beginning. It's not fair for you to get your piece in. But if someone else has been recognized, calls to the question, then we can certainly have that done. I see someone who is asking to be recognized. Sir. Is there a second? Okay, as I explained last night, I'm generally not a big fan of calling the question if I'm concerned that there hasn't been sufficient debate. We've had a lot of debate, so let's move immediately to considering the question. So, the motion. The motion is to call the question, which means, in plain English, that we end debate at this point and move directly to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? This requires a majority. It clearly had that, and I so declare. So we will now move immediately to a vote. By the way, I did not check with the cafeteria because the people who were in the cafeteria have left. So it's just us in this cozy little room. All right, so back to it, and you didn't get a chance for a closing statement. Sorry about that, but that was the will of the meeting. So you guys can have a seat. And we'll try to do it. This is a 2/3 again, folks. So I'll try to give it a visual call if I can. All those in favor, please raise your pink slips. Okay. All those opposed. Motion carries by more than 2/3, and I so declare. Article 24 is adopted. Did I call that number correctly, or is it 23?
Correct.
24. That was 23. Oh, no, that was 24.
That's correct, Wayne.
No, that was 24. Okay, good. Okay, so, yeah, I thought I didn't realize this one would take so long. So we are already, it's 10 o'clock, and we've got a lot left to go. So there's kind of three choices. We can do a couple more to a certain time. We can say, let's just plow through to the end.
Wayne.
Let me, I'm sorry?
We already did the presentation for 25. We should at least do 25, right?
Well, yeah. No, I certainly we'll finish up the solar ones for sure. But just so that we get a sense here, just give me a show of hands. How many people would prefer to come back tomorrow evening? Okay, and how many people would like to stick it out as long as we need to? Oh, it's about divided. So tell you what, let's here's what I'm going to recommend. If we could Let us try to go through at least Article 27. I'm hoping that the 25 will be relatively, 24 and 25 would be quick. And 27, which is the right to farm. Mr. Lee, who is scheduled to present that, is unavailable tomorrow night, I know, so it would be appreciated, I'm sure, by the proponents there if they got the opportunity to present that tonight. So let's proceed as expeditiously as we can. Mr. DeCock, why don't you just make the motion since you're there?
Yep. I move Article 25 as printed in the motions handbook.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Quickly.
This is just about authorizing the town boards. The last one was about the bylaws, so we only need a majority vote on this, and that's all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you very much. And the recommendations on this, Selectmen, School Committee, both unanimous, Conservation Commission supporting Energy Task Force voting to support, FinCom support, yes? Okay, thank you. Any other boards or committees? Okay, any debate on this one? Okay, this is just a majority vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? The motion carries by a majority, and I so declare. Article 26, the school parking lot resurfacing project. Mr. Lewis?
I got the same presentation.
I move that the town vote to borrow the sum of $250,000 to resurface the Carlisle Public School parking lot, and further to authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into a contract or contracts for said purpose.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. DeCock.
Keep going. It's article, slide 35. Okay, Article 26 is about paving the school parking lot. You probably walked across the parking lot to get here tonight. I'm sure you saw the distressed state it is in. These pictures tell the story of a parking lot reaching the end of its useful life. It has been 32 years since the parking lot was paved. It is in need of repair. However, the school committee was loath to ask the town for more money, and so it has been deferred for some time. This ties into the solar project in two ways. First, from a logistics perspective, the best outcome is if we do the underground work first, then repave the parking lot, and then install the canopies over the new lot. This makes it easy to pave and leaves the parking lot pristine without any patches. Second, from a financial perspective, the lease payments from the school canopies alone are projected to be enough to pay for the cost of paving. This means that it can be done without increasing your taxes, effectively for free, using the funding source that will sit above the parking lot. Further, if we wait and do it in a few years, it will be logistically more difficult for the paving company to work around and under the canopies, and the cost will go up. The parking lot clearly needs to be repaved. Now is the best time to do it. The cost of paving is more than covered by the projected revenue generated by the solar canopies above that specific lot, making it essentially free to you. We ask for your support to repave the Carlisle School parking lot. Mr. Moderator?
Thank you. So the votes on this, we had selectmen voting unanimously in favor. FinCom, your recommendation?
5-0 in support.
5-0 in support. School Committee unanimously. Conservation Commission unanimous. And Energy Task Force also voting to support. Any other boards or committees? Let me ask you, Mr. DeCock, just to clarify the timing here relative to the question that Mr. Fink had raised earlier. So this work would be done this summer, is that correct?
Yes. So the only thing slowing us down at this point is the site plan review and getting all the boards to sign off. And after that, we have the open bids back for the paving. And so we're really ready to get moving. So I think we would be quite likely to have the parking lot paved before school starts in the fall. Can't guarantee that, of course. Things slow down, when they go through town government, but that would be my expectation.
Okay. Any debate on this one? Discussion? Yes, sir. Mr. Verge.
Since the solar company's here.
Yeah,
and it's gonna
please,
benefit them- 29 Indian Hill, Sam Verge. Since the solar company's here and it's going to benefit them as well, would they help chip in on the cost of repaving?
Could you answer that?
That has been a topic of negotiation with them for some time. The current thought on the matter is that we will ask them to add additional conduit underneath when they do the trenching, so that in the future we can add electric car chargers, and that will offset the amount that they would have paved. So that way when we, in the future, sometime decide to put electric car chargers at the school, we won't have to rip up our beautiful parking lot.
Thank you. Please, sir.
George Vendora, 898 Maple Street. What is the payout from the solar facility per year for this solar facility?
So that depends on the block number. We believe we're going to hit block 3, and I know that at block 3 it's around $22,000 per year for the lease payment, plus about $7,000 for the taxes. The $250,000, the bids have come in, I believe the low bid is $220,000. And if we work out the bond on that, it works out to about $17,500 per year. So we can be in either block 4 or 3, and just the lease payments alone from the school only will cover the cost. It's less than a quarter of the cost of the revenue we're generating overall with the solar systems.
But the $250,000 will be paid up front with the bond, is that it?
With a bond, yes. That's why we're going to need a 2/3 vote on this one.
So you have $250,000, then you have the cost of the debt, and then subtract it out, you get the payout from the solar company. That you balance.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
It's $250,000 for the entire job. You're gonna,
Yeah,
you're gonna
actually,
fund
could we ask Mr. Trill from the FinCom to address that?
So if approved, the parking lot would be, what I want to say is these are separate topics. I know it was presented as the solar panels can pay for the parking lot.
Exactly, free.
Right, that's in our discussions on the Finance Committee and with the school committee, looking at the school parking lot, it's 32 years old, it's exceeded the expected life, it needs to be repaved. If we don't approve it tonight, it'll be back at town meeting within probably 3 years, and we'll be voting to repave the parking lot regardless. So the conversation was, does it make sense to install canopies now, rip up the parking lot, patch it, then in 2 to 3 years, go and repave the parking lot with the solar panels installed? That doesn't seem to make logistic or logical sense. That's why we support the idea of let's do the parking lot now before the panels go in so that we have a better parking lot. And it's going to have to be done either way. They're separate projects. That's the point I want to make. The reason it's being brought tonight is because the solar panels are going in. Let's do it now, do it the best way, and we'll get another 30 years out of the parking lot. But either way, the parking lot has to be repaved within 3 to 5 years.
Scott, with all due respect, that makes 100% sense from your point of view. You're just repeating what he had said already. That's not the issue. I know it's 32 years old. I know it makes sense to make now. I know what the stages are. I'm just debating one word, free. Okay?
No, and I wouldn't use that word. That's why I said these are separate projects. I'm saying we're not looking at the solar panels subsidizing the school. The money from the solar panels goes back to the general fund used for the town. It's not, so I would agree, I would not use the word free.
Okay. I want to establish as not free. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more comment, discussion on this? Okay, we're ready to move to a vote. This is to authorize borrowing of $250,000 for the resurfacing of the school parking lot. Does require a 2/3 majority to pass. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries by more than 2/3, and I so declare. Let's keep moving. Maybe we'll speed up here a little bit. I recognize Ms. Reed.
We're on 27.
Article 27,
Thank
the
you.
right to farm bylaw.
I move that town vote to amend the general bylaws by adding a new right to farm bylaw as printed in the town motion handbook.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Lee.
Mr. Moderator, I move to vote to support our Article 27, the right to farm bylaw, as presented in your motion booklet.
I'm sorry. No, Kate just did that, so you can go to your presentation.
All righty. Moving right along.
Use the microphone.
Okay. The language that is shown in your motion booklet is a little different from the language that was shown in the warrant. The language was changed from the original template that we'd used from the state, and we put it back in to clarify what might be misunderstood with regard to practice that might be illegal or impermissible under the Carlisle's existing statutes or bylaws. It's what is redlined on the slide. Carlisle is an historically agricultural community which has been home to dairy, hog, and poultry operations throughout its history, as well as home gardeners and horticulturalists. The town has now been reduced to 7 significant farms, 2 of which have been saved due to the insight and energy of fellow Carlisleans who understood the historical and cultural value of farming in our town. We are all grateful for that, I am certain. Carlisle is also home to a bevy of backyard operations that produce meat, fruits and vegetables, flowers, honey, eggs, and milk for sale and/or personal consumption. So why do we need a right to farm bylaw on the town's books? One reason might be to state and restate the obvious, just in case anybody thinks that agriculture in its many forms is a nuisance. Making agricultural right also encourages practitioners to adopt best practices in order not to disrupt the rights of neighbors and abutters to enjoy the amenities which they have acquired or created when they moved to Carlisle. Many of the towns close to Carlisle, including Littleton, Westford, Chelmsford, Concord, amongst others, have previously adopted right to farm bylaws because they already understand the prominence of a healthy agricultural community in creating a sustainable environment which will attract home buyers who value open space as more than simply a passive recreational opportunity or ball field. Thus, the aim of this bylaw is both aspirational and affirmational. Generally, farming in Massachusetts is protected under Article 97 of the Massachusetts Constitution, as well as under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40A, Section 3, and Chapter 90, Section 9, as well as Article 89 of the Articles of Amendment to the Massachusetts Constitution, otherwise known as the Home Rule Amendment. More than half of the towns in Massachusetts have an agricultural commission and/or right to farm bylaw. Carlisle currently has an active agricultural commission, or AgCom. Our bylaw is taken from the state's template and is adapted from the bylaws of neighboring towns which have previously been voted at their town meetings. As seen in our motion booklet, our bylaw will contain a declaration that states that normal agricultural practice is recognized in Carlisle to have community value. Go back one. Should a dispute arise over some aspect of agricultural practice, it will be settled the way most disputes in Carlisle are resolved. First, by reaching across the fence to settle the disagreement amicably, or secondly, by bringing the issue to the attention of the selectmen who may then enlist the help of the most appropriate secondary board or commission. As food of known or local provenance becomes increasingly important, promoting and protecting the reasonable interests of our farmers and local producers of all stripes is a first step to ensuring a shorter food chain, ensuring freshness, and accepting the idea that lettuce is not grown behind the counter at your local supermarket. If you are to know your farmer, then we as citizens of Carlisle must know that there are conscientious growers in our midst, that they share our collective values, and they have our best interests firmly etched in their modus operandi. I urge you to support our passage of Article 27 this evening and to follow in the footsteps of so many of our neighboring towns. Thank you, and I hope you have a good night.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lee. We have the selectmen, the AgCom recommends the town adopt, as do the selectmen unanimously. Conscom in support. Planning Board Planning Board voted unanimously 5-0 to recommend that Article 27 be withdrawn for further study and consideration. And I then did just want to note, we do, again, we have the situation. The bylaw as presented, there's some additional language in there that differs, does not differ as additional than what was originally in the warrant. But it's a valid motion to proceed. Any debate or discussion on this one? Mr. Hedden?
Can the planning board explain why they voted to recommend that the article be withdrawn?
Mr. Gambino, are you able to handle that one?
Pete Gambino, 280 Stonygate. It was really just an informational purpose. We actually found out about this bylaw when reading the warrant doing our annual warrant review right before town meeting. We didn't have anyone come present to us. We didn't know about it. And our biggest worry is the effect that it could have on other bylaws, from those changes. And we just didn't have enough information at the time to do it. So that's why we voted to withdraw it at that point. But our vote was only a recommendation, obviously, but take it as it is.
Anything further? Okay, thank you. Please.
Jeannie Janetsko, 898 Maple Street in Carlisle, of course. I love to eat, so I'm not questioning the right to farm or anything like that, but I'm concerned about some wording that's here. On page 28, they talk about generally accepted agricultural practices, and I look at that as standard agricultural practices. And standard agricultural practices to me, and I may be ignorant, are such things as you can go use GMO types corn, you can use glyphosate, you can do a whole bunch of things because it's generally accepted and there's no particular law. Now, what if something is done on one farm, let's say that is not an organic farm, that affects another farm that is organic, okay? Can't be a matter necessarily of shaking hands over a wall or a fence. There may be real financial repercussions. And what happens in situations like that? And second, what if a practice occurs that, let's say, the town would not necessarily endorse, like, let's say, I really don't know, but let's say like treatment of the animals or treatment of the land. And then there's a definition here of forestry, and we're a forested town. And I don't know what it means by growing and harvesting of forest products upon forest land. Does that mean people can come into the town and buy a whole section of forest and cut it down and make it lumber? So my question is out of ignorance. So if you could explain a little bit and reassure me, that would be nice.
So which part of that would you like me to address first?
Well, let's say the organic and the inorganic farmer, and the inorganic farmer's practices are going to affect the organic farmer's practices.
That would not be addressed under this bylaw. That would be a dispute that would be legislated between competing interests, shall we say. These are not addressed in any of the right to farm bylaws. These are very broad-based, aspirational, affirmational rules, if you will, that address the right to farm and do not legislate practice. Standard agricultural practice is, in fact, defined in the state rules, and it does not separate the difference between organic versus non-organic. There are a myriad of different types of standard practices in America, and there are they are defined in different ways by different groups at different times, and to legislate exactly what one might be as opposed to another, we'd be here for the rest of our lives, which I think
So
is probably not a good idea.
if we can just be really clear on this, in terms of the question about inorganic practices perhaps affecting someone who's organic, are you saying, Mr. Lee, that this bylaw does not do anything to change the situation either in favor or against? It doesn't give the inorganic farmer any more rights than they previously would have had?
That is correct, and also by changing, going back to the second slide, all farmers are required to abide by the laws and statutes in the town of Carlisle.
Okay, that's.
Okay, so and to answer your-
and then, just so we can keep moving on, could you clarify forestry
I was
products?
just getting to that.
And speak in the microphone, please.
Were you to own a forest, you are, as the landowner, you are entitled to cut timber as you wish. This does not address this question of Weyerhaeuser Corporation coming in, buying large lots and clear cutting it. This is not the intent of the bylaw.
Okay, but can it be done even if it's not the intent?
I'm sorry?
Can it still be done?
Could you
for
please
instance-
approach the microphone?
I'm sorry. Can it still be done if I were to buy a large acreage? And I'm not talking obviously hundreds of acres, but if I have a 20-acre property, could I go in and, even though it was not the intent of the bylaw, could that basically be done? For instance, I couldn't cut down the 20 acres and make houses out of it, so I couldn't do that.
That question would not be addressed under the bylaw. That's a property rights question.
Okay, thank you.
You know, if you own 20 acres and you want to put a subdivision on it, then you've got to come to the town first.
Okay.
Otherwise, you can log it. There's no reason, in my understanding of the laws, that you can't log it, but that question is not addressed in this bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. At microphone 4, please.
Jeremy Burley, 47 Hart Farm Road. Point of clarification. The recommendations of Selectmen Agriculture and Conservation, is it as printed in the warrant or as moved on the floor?
I believe everyone had it as in the warrant. Is that correct? Did you revote?
We revoted this one. So
Yes, the selectmen did have the opportunity to review the additional language and did vote in favor.
As did the Conscom.
And the Conscom also supports the motion as made.
Thank you.
Mr. Friedman?
As does AgCom, since they approved the language.
As does AgCom, yes. Okay, anything else further on this? At microphone 3.
Jeff Johnson, 64 Blaisdell Drive. Let me start by saying that I do respect farmers greatly, having grown up in a very rural community, farming community. And I respect the fact that Carlisle is historically a farming community. However, Carlisle is no longer truly a farming community. It is a bedroom community with several farms. And I don't want to put any restrictions on those farms, but I'm concerned about certain wording in this that says the right to farm allows activities that night or day that include noise, odor, dust, fumes, and I'm wondering if those override any town regulations with regard to noise. Based on an experience that happened a few years ago where one of our emergency responders had someone raising chickens next to his house, had roosters that were crowing all night, kept him awake all night, and the neighbor, he tried nicely to negotiate with him, but ignored him. And so seeing that anybody with 2 acres generating $1,000 could proclaim their property a commercial farm, I'm concerned that that could cause problems in this bedroom community. So I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
Okay, so just to frame the question, could you please comment on whether this changes or overrides the enforcement of any other town bylaws or rules?
in no way changes or overrides the enforcement of any other town rules or bylaws. Specifically, to address the emergency responder personnel question, that is, he was not generating sufficient income to, put dinner on his table at night, with or without the rooster. That should have been settled between the neighbors. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, they could not amicably arrange a settlement. It came to the board, unfortunately, too late, and it was a very sorry situation.
Mr. Moderator?
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Brown.
I'd just like to add that is exactly a question that the Board of Selectmen had when we read that section, and we checked with Town Council, and this right to farm bylaw does not override the new noise bylaw.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Huberman.
Steve Huberman, Concord Street. I'm on the Agricultural Commission. The town bylaw about the rooster noise does not affect commercial farmers anyway. That's a really separate thing. The state protects the commercial farmers. They can make the noise. But the rooster bylaw really is for non-commercial people with roosters in town. So it really wouldn't affect it anyway.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Friedman.
So I think the answer to most of these questions is in the very beginning of the bylaw, which is basically says that the purpose and intent of this bylaw is to state with emphasis the right to farm accorded to all citizens of the Commonwealth under Article 97 of the Constitution and all state statutes and regulations thereunder. So essentially, as John stated, this is affirmational and aspirational. It doesn't give more rights to any citizen than they would otherwise have as a resident of the state if they're a commercial farmer. And I think the key advantage of this bylaw is it creates, by declaring ourselves a right to farm community, since we do have farms, it makes it clear to anyone moving into town, and hopefully the realtors in town will be aware of this, and it will create reasonable expectations for people moving into town, that if you live in Carlisle, you might occasionally, at the times of the year when people spread manure on fields, smell manure, and we consider that normal and we consider it okay. But it doesn't give more rights to anybody to do that than they would have otherwise.
Okay, thank you. Microphone 2.
Mitchell Weiss, 523 Brook Street. Since we have these rights under the Mass Constitution, why are we bothering to generate a bylaw to reaffirm them? Have rights been abrogated in the town to the farmers?
Okay, we have, this is a, to be very clear, as it's been stated, this is an aspirational statement of values. Doesn't create any new rights. Okay, are we ready for a vote here then? Okay, there's a majority vote. We're voting on the right to farm new general bylaw. Article 27, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay. Motion carries by a majority, and I so declare. Okay. People want to keep going. Yeah, it is very late. At this point, I think I see people moving to the door, and we do have a ways to go. So could I have a motion to adjourn to tomorrow evening at 7?
Motion to adjourn. Seconded. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay?
Nay.
Motion carries by majority. I strongly, strongly urge you all to call your friends and neighbors and tell them we need a quorum tomorrow night.